My apologies for the hiatus in transmission, but it's just recently that I've managed to convince the rogue trader who allowed me to be part of his crew to facilitate this broadcast. To elaborate on recent events, the encounter I feared with the Inquisition occurred, and they just happened to send an Inquisitor after me. And when she found me, we had a slight disagreement. I wanted to live, and she took exception to that. But fortunately, we were swiftly interrupted by the worsening of the unusual rain, which afforded my escape from K4 as the weather spiraled out of control across the planet. Seeing as entering a top secret facility is a type of trick you can only pull off once without being captured, locked up, or turned into a servitor, I had to go down new avenues to procure the information that I am about to provide to you. Said information pertains to the Horus Heresy. Joining forces with the rogue trader proved unexpectedly fruitful. This, along with the resurgence of the Primarchs, which made securing old secrets a challenge for the Imperium, meant I was granted a boon in seeking clandestine knowledge. For security purposes, this broadcast originates from a distant planet facilitated by a servitor armed with a remote control and a self-destruct mechanism. Fate favored me amidst the planetary cataclysm which ravaged K4, offering me the escape I required to continue these broadcasts. Thus, I present these logs as Imperial Scholar Saturni, documenting the secrets hidden by the Imperium in the turbulent era known as the Horus Heresy. In the annals of Imperial history, a singular cataclysm emerged, shattering the very fabric of unity that the Emperor had woven together. This is the Horus Heresy, a seismic civil war that scarred the era of M31, which stands not only as a chronicle of strife, but as a testament to the fragility of the Imperium's very foundations. This event would be triggered by the insidious machinations of chaos. This rebellion found fertile ground in factors that corroded the loyalty of the Legio Astartes and the Primarchs, in particular the enigma of the Emperor's clandestine endeavors on Terra, concealed even from his sons, the Primarchs. This would birth a bitter harvest of distrust and disillusionment. His withdrawal from the Great Crusade to pursue undisclosed projects sowed the seeds of abandonment amongst his favorite son, Horus Lupercal, the War Master, along with his brethren, fostering a rift that widened over time. Simultaneously, the ascent of the Council of Terra would rankle the proud Primarchs, perceiving these mortal bureaucrats as interlopers, usurping their divine dominion. The Legio Astartes harbored resentment towards a future where humanity, not the Emperor's kin, would govern. However, the heresy would find its incendiary spark in the chastisement of Lorgar and the Word-bearers. The Emperor's censure of their veneration of his divine stature drove them into the arms of chaos. Disillusioned, they sought solace and power in the abyss, eventually weaving a web of treachery aimed at the Emperor's undoing. Covertly, the Word-bearers seeded the tendrils of rebellion, establishing clandestine warrior lodges within other legions, insidiously sowing the seeds of dissent by posing an affectation of brotherhood. However, startling revelations from the lips of Malcador the Sigillite himself, the first Lord of the Imperium, hint at a secretive orchestration. According to his records, both him and the Emperor instigated discord amongst the Primarchs, envisioning a future where mankind, not superhuman overlords, would reign supreme. Yet the malevolent forces of chaos intervened, casting their dark shadow over these designs and precipitating the calamitous denouncement that unfolded during the Horus Heresy. The enigmatic tale spun by Malcador teeters on the precipice between truth and deception. Cloaked in ambiguity, its veracity remains shrouded, leaving the chronicles of this dark epoch veiled in an impenetrable haze of uncertainty. In the wake of the Horus Heresy's shadow loomed the Triumph of Ullanor, a spectacle etched in the annals of Imperial history. This grand event occurred in the late 30th millennium as a monumentous crusade against the Orc Empire, which was commanded over by Overlord Uruk. Ullanor itself was the epicenter of the Greenskins' domain, which bore witness to the culmination of a colossal endeavor, where the might of the Imperium coalesced. Embarked upon this campaign were 100,000 Space Marines, accompanied by 8 million valiant Imperial Army troops, alongside a fleet of Imperial starships and a myriad of support staff, symbolizing the zenith of the Great Crusade and the tireless efforts of humanity's attempts to reunite their scattered worlds. The Ullanor Crusade epitomized the Imperium's triumph over the largest concentration of orcs in recorded history. Even though said orcs were vanquished, this event would eventually serve as a precursor for the cataclysmic Wars for Armageddon, which would unfold on this very same planet eons later in the 41st millennium. The aftermath of this triumph reverberated across the cosmos, echoed by the Emperor's decree to metamorphose Ullanor into Mundus Temporum, a trophy world which would memorialize this crusade in galactic records, and it stood as a testament to the prowess and valor of all who fought for the cause of humanity, and for the longest time it would immortalize the grandeur of this conquest. For 2 centuries, the Emperor's relentless pursuit had traversed the galaxies, forging alliances, quelling Xenos threats, and regretfully subduing those who resisted Imperial unity through force. However, a portentous shift loomed, destined to pivot upon the terrain of Ullanor, altering the course of history for solar decades, standard centuries, and even millennia. The vivid spectacle of the Triumph of Ullanor, etched in indelible memories in the hearts of every astartes, a beacon of unity amidst the impending darkness of the Horus Heresy. The preparations for such a monumentous event would witness the efforts of the Mechanicum, reshaping the scarred terrain into a ceremonial stage befitting the glory of victory. Geomorpher platoons wielded ancient Mechanicum technology to sculpt the land, interring millions of orcish remains beneath transplanted rocks and the remains of shattered mountains. Amidst the landscape, an expansive boulevard emerged, adorned by marker posts, which were further adorned with the skulls of the orcish commanders who had resisted the Emperor's will. Flanked by ethereal flames of promethium, the gathering bore witness to a majestic assembly where the Imperial Army and Titan legions formed an impenetrable fortress around the commemoration. Each individual present had been selected for their exceptional valor and conduct. Then they would be bestowed with the Ullanor Triumph Bar, a symbol forged from reclaimed bolter shells. The scene unfolded with the colossal presence of the Collegia Technica war machines, who were a testament to Imperial might, while aerospace fighters painted the skies with their contrails. High above, Imperial warships sailed through the upper atmosphere in an affirmation of loyalty to the Emperor and the unity of mankind. The Triumph of Ullanor was such an imposing event that even the presence of the Space Marine legions was represented by their Primarchs, a gathering of superhuman beings like no other would occur. They were almost akin to gods and angels incarnate. Amongst this illustrious assembly was Mortarion at the helm of the Death Guard, Fulgrim, who exuded resplendence and grace while adorned in opulent finery as he radiated a shimmer of gold and platinum. Magnus the Red, the enigmatic lord of the unknown, a figure whose soul mirrored the elusive mysteries of the warp and its lethal, ethereal enigmas as he presented an inscrutable countenance. In contrast, Lorgar Aurelian was seen as a brooding zealot even back then, as he concealed an intense fervor within himself, his quiet demeanor betraying a deep-seated passion. Angron, the embodiment of unbridled rage and anguish, a gladiator-like lord whose volatile fury shimmered perpetually on the edge of eruption, which remained turbulent even amidst this gathering. Rogel Dorn, the unyielding Imperial fist, who epitomized unwavering determination and implacable focus, mirrored the indomitable bastion of loyalty and readiness. There was also Jagatai Khan of the White Scars, who adorned his ornate armor with a tapestry of over 1,000 narratives. Each step across the terrain was a testament to his legion's long-standing narrative traditions. There was also Sanguinius, the noble figure at the head of the Blood Angels, accompanied by his revered sanguinary guard, donning formidable wings much like their father. At the pinnacle of this assembly stood Horus, the hero of Ullanor, and the future Imperial War Master, adorned with an unprecedented Imperial title that resounded with the echo of his name. The declaration by the Emperor bestowing the supreme military mantle of War Master upon Horus was followed by his announcing of his own retreat to Terra for a clandestine undertaking which was shrouded in secrecy. Said secrecy stunned the assembled dignitaries of these legions. Thus, within the vast expanse of Ullanor's triumph, and amidst the presence of these titans and leaders, a seismic shift would ripple throughout the fabric of the very Imperium itself, heralding an era marked by decisions that would echo across the corridors of time and shape the destiny of mankind itself. This shift was in large part due to Horus Lupercal's new esteemed title as Imperial War Master, as he was entrusted with supreme command over the Imperium's military forces, which would include his brother's legions, in essence becoming first amongst equals. This shift in leadership sparked disquietude amongst the Primarchs, which was exacerbated due to the Emperor choosing to withdraw from active participation in battles and veiling his intentions upon returning to Terra. Delving deep beneath the Imperial Palace into his Imperial dungeons, the Emperor would embark on a clandestine undertaking, an ambitious endeavor to create a human extension into the labyrinthian dimension known as a webway, aided by select agents of the Mechanicum, along with Malcador the Sigillite and his very own Custodes. With the military campaigns now entrusted to the Primarch's very own wills and the newly appointed War Master Horus, the Emperor could completely redirect the attention of his trusted aides such as Malcador and Fabricator General Calber Hall towards his new project. Their new mandate centered around the establishment of the Council of Terra, a civilian governing body entrusted with administering imperial law, overseeing imperial tithes, and managing the intricacies of governing the vast Imperium of Man. Malcador would assume the pivotal role of Regent of Terra, and he would preside as the First Lord of the Council, joined by dignitaries such as Constantine Valdor of the Legio Custodes and masters from key Imperium departments. As the council commenced its governance, the Emperor immersed himself further still into his subterranean workshops, tirelessly dedicating his efforts into his new and mysterious project. However, the formation of the council brewed further unrest amongst the distant Primarchs, whose dismay grew upon learning of this decision. The Primarchs felt aggrieved, viewing the council as an affront to their sacrifices and a usurpation of their rightful role in governing the Imperium. This discontentment seeded further resentment, which became a fertile ground for the insidious machinations of the ruinous powers. Horus, later rallying support for his rebellion against the Emperor, weaponized this discontent, as he portrayed the Emperor's actions as a direct betrayal of their trust, emphasizing the sidelining of the Primarchs in favor of mortal administrators and tech adepts. Horus depicted a vision of an Imperium burdened by bureaucratic encumbrances and bereft of the martial vigor it once possessed, as being the outcome of these decisions. Thus, the creation of the Council of Terra becoming a major catalyst of dissent, which mirrors the current issues the loyal Primarchs face when contending with the Council. Amidst the monumental shifts which resonated with certain Primarchs was the apprehension that stemmed from the belief that their accomplishments, the triumphs of themselves and their brothers, risked oblivion akin to that of ancient Terra's forgotten civilizations. Such fear, hubris, and misplaced pride paved a path for Horus's tragic descent into the clutches of chaos. This marked the genesis of the cataclysm of civil war, which would plunge the galaxy into an enduring age of darkness. However, Horus and his disillusioned kin misinterpreted the Emperor's vision behind the Council of Terra's creation. Far from a coup against his Primarchs, it was designed as an administrative core, which the Emperor envisioned as being vested in mortal hands. The governance of the Imperium would be executed through bureaucratic mechanisms, not wielded by an elevated military aristocracy. The Primarchs were to be revered, and their Space Marines consecrated as they conceived the actualization of the Emperor's dream, a unified human Imperium shielded against a myriad of threats. They were never intended to be rulers, nor to be overlords of humanity, or even an immortal hereditary caste who imposed domination through sheer might. Their mandate, rather, was to safeguard humanity, not to usurp the mantle of tyrants. The Primarchs and the Space Marines were to be guardians, not overlords. In the annals of history, the moment preceding the start of the heresy proper, being the saga which occurred on Isstvan III, a grim tale whose roots unfolded within the Word-Bearer's Legion, long before the shadow of the Horus Heresy loomed. Their Primarch, Lorgar, would harbor an unwavering devotion, pledging both himself and his astartes to the service of the ruinous powers. This was rooted in his fervent religiosity. Lorgar was a zealot of profound conviction by nature, who perceived visions of himself heralding the Emperor as a divine being. His dogmatic fervor, birthed by the relentless religious strife of his homeworld, Cloiches, led him to seeking to enshrine the worship of the Emperor as the dominant creed across the galaxy. When the Emperor finally reclaimed his son, Cloiches stood united under Lorgar's cult of the God Emperor. A jubilant spectacle would occur, an extravagant portrayal of piety that endured for solar months. Yet the Emperor, disapproving of organized religion as a deviation from the imperial truth, remained aloof. His mission in the Great Crusade was not to bind humanity in the shackles of superstition, but to illuminate their minds with reason and science. Following these fervent celebrations, Lorgar would assume mastery of the 17th Legion of Space Marines, which would be rechristened as the Word-Bearers, in allegiance to the Primarch's religious doctrine. Cor Ferron, Lorgar's adopted father and spiritual mentor, augmented as a rare adult Space Marine, joined the Word-Bearers as an influential figure, albeit he would not be considered a true astartes. He ascended as Lorgar's confidant, lieutenant, and commander of the Legion's elite First Company, furthering his religious devotion. Throughout the Great Crusade, the Word-Bearers would embark on a relentless mission to purge heresy and blasphemy from the Imperium. They incinerated ancient texts and icons. Then they would erect monuments venerating the Emperor as the divine entity of humanity. Profound treatises extolling the Emperor's divinity echoed across the conquered worlds, all orchestrated by the Legion's eminent chaplains. Despite their gradual pace in assimilating worlds, the Word-Bearers wielded religious zealotry as a potent tool, securing unwavering devotion and loyalty to the Imperium through their tactics. In this early epoch, Lorgar authored the Laetitio Divinatus, paradoxically prophetic as it would later catalyze the inception of the imperial cult and the ecclesiarchy, which in essence binds the current Imperium together, despite being a traitor. This was a tome that etched the Emperor as the rightful god of humanity, rather ironic considering its authorship. During the time preceding the dark clouds of the Horus Heresy, some 40 years prior, the fervent loyalty of Lorgar and the Word-Bearer's Legion to the Emperor and his Imperium remained beyond reproach. Their compliant worlds dutifully rendered tithes in the Emperor's name, and the mandates of Terra reverberated unchallenged across these liberated domains under the Word-Bearer's sway. For almost a full century, Lorgar and his legion propelled the Emperor's Great Crusade, unmarred by the Emperor's reprimand, despite their fervent worship and divergence from the imperial truth that would trouble the Emperor deeply regardless. Despite the Emperor's parental affections, he grew increasingly discontent by Lorgar's unyielding adherence to his faith, which conflicted with the core principles of reason and science. Initially tolerant, the Emperor found his patience strained as the Great Crusade progressed, dismayed by the word-bearers' sluggish conquests and their strict enforcement of religious doctrine, which continued to clash more and more starkly with his vision for a secular imperium, led the Emperor to become determined to purge the influence of organized religion from his son and the worlds he conquered. The Emperor dispatched a formidable task force led by the Ultramarines Primarch Reboot Guilliman to obliterate Monarchia. This was an emblem of religious devotion to the Emperor, founded by Lorgar, essentially working as his city on a hill. The Word-bearers, under Lorgar's command, faced the Emperor's wrathful censure on Kor's desolate surface, bearing witness to the psychic coercion that compelled all, including Lorgar, to kneel at his father's feet. The Primarch was shattered by his father's condemnation, plunging him into a profound despair. Feeling abandoned, Lorgar secluded himself, save for Cor Ferron, the Word-bearer's first captain, and Erebus, the Legion's first chaplain. These trusted confidants empathized with Lorgar's unfulfilled spiritual yearnings, steering his thoughts towards the ancient gods of Clochis' old faith, entities that accepted zealous worship unlike the Emperor. Here, amidst the turmoil of his internal tumult, the sinister veil shrouding the Chaos Gods was unveiled to Lorgar. Enthralled by the prospect of entities embracing his fervor, Lorgar demanded a pilgrimage in pursuit of these newly discovered gods, marking the seeds of the coming heresy within the bosom of the Word-bearer's Legion, the former most pious worshippers of the Emperor. Prompted by both First Captain Cor Ferron and First Chaplain Erebus, both who were previously clandestine adherents to the Chaos Gods via Clochis' old faith, Lorgar embarked on a pivotal journey with the Word-bearer's Legion and part of the 1301's expeditionary fleet of the Great Crusade, venturing into the uncharted peripheries of known Imperial space. At this juncture, Lorgar had yet to succumb to Chaos's corruption, but he had relinquished his reverence for the Emperor of Mankind, deeming him an unworthy deity to be worshipped. Disillusioned with the Emperor's dismissal of humanity's innate pursuit of the divine, Lorgar sought to explore the existence of deities more deserving of mankind's reverence. Though severed from his former loyalty and affection for the Emperor, Lorgar and his legion nominally rejoined the Great Crusade, their efforts cloaked behind a facade, dedicated solely into furthering the pilgrimage of Lorgar. Accompanying the Word-bearers were 5 members of the Legio Custodes, tasked by the Emperor to vigilantly oversee their actions, in particular preventing any reoccurrence of past transgressions. Their quest for insight into the primordial truth, or the realms where mortals and deities interacted, led Lorgar's expeditionary fleet to the Cadia system, which was proximal to the galaxy's largest warp storm, known as the Eye of Terror. The expeditionary fleet's master of astropaths conveyed an alarming revelation to Lorgar, peculiar voices resonating from within the vicinity of the colossal warp rift, voices that communed directly with the Primarch. These ethereal utterances were none other than the chaotic entities dwelling within the Immaterium. In this faithful encounter within the Cadia system, Lorgar's suspicions found validation, unraveling the reality that mired religions across the galaxy, echoing parallels with his homeworld's old faith. They showed him that they were not merely fragments of the human psyche, but manifestations of worship, revealing the universal truth embodied by chaos. This revelation of the primordial truth concerning the existence of chaos instigated a profound transformation within Lorgar and the Word-bearers. Exposed to the ruinous powers, they underwent a gradual corruption, marking the inaugural descent of a Space Marine Legion into the worship of the Chaos Gods, fostering a clandestine descent against the Emperor. Through the remaining years of the Great Crusade, Lorgar and his legion embarked on a mission to illuminate humanity regarding the authentic spiritual fabric of the universe. Yet their efforts to enlighten humanity floundered, so they resorted to subterfuge and deceit, manipulating 9 Primarchs, notably including the War Master, Horus, into aligning with the cause of chaos, as dictated by their newfound deities. Recognizing that humanity's enlightenment through chaos necessitated a forcible departure from the Emperor's proclaimed imperial truth, Lorgar willingly orchestrated pivotal conflicts such as the horrific Battle of Isstvan III, the ruthless dropsite massacre of Isstvan V, and ultimately the cataclysmic Horus Heresy. As Horus openly revolted against the Emperor, the word-bearers swiftly rallied behind him, standing as one of the primary legions to endorse his cause. Moreover, worlds conquered by the word-bearers, subsequent to their embrace of chaos, seamlessly aligned with the traitors, having been surreptitiously ensnared to the worship of the ruinous powers during the twilight era of the Great Crusade. Another factor that must be noted is that during the Great Crusade, the idealistic image of the Primarchs as paragons of humanity who were flawless was shattered. Despite their superhuman stature, each Primarch was marred by flaws inherent to their human nature: vanity, egoism, hunger for power, jealousy, arrogance, amongst many others. All of these would be avenues for chaos to corrupt the greatest of humanity. Upon assuming command of the Great Crusade, War Master Horus dedicated himself earnestly to his newfound responsibilities. However, discord was already brewing amongst the Primarchs and factions within the Imperium concerning the Emperor's decision to withdraw from the campaign and the restructure of the Imperium. Amidst this turmoil, only a select few, including the cunning Lorgar, remained steadfast by the War Master's side. Discontent also brewed over the Council of Terra's decrees, as they kept shifting administrative power and tax burdens onto the newly subjugated worlds without interaction from the Primarchs who had so recently conquered them. This was a point of contention that clashed with Horus's very own vision. More troublingly, Horus grappled with a sense of failure towards his father, aggravated by the Emperor's clandestine actions on Terra and his secret webway project, which he kept secret even from his favored son. These seeds of bitterness, festering in resentment and frustration, would sow a harvest of treacherous conquests, which Lorgar, and through him, chaos, would reap. The pivotal turn in Horus's fate transpired on Davin's moon, where his legion, the Luna Wolves, had previously embraced Davinite warrior lodges. These lodges, once innocuous warrior fraternities, became instruments for Lorgar and his first chaplain to manipulate Horus and his sons, steering him towards the worship of the Chaos Gods. Originating from Cloichus, a world steeped in religious fervor, Lorgar's word-bearers had venerated the Emperor's deity, seeking to propagate this belief across the Imperium. However, with the Emperor's vehement opposition to organized religion and his chastisement of the Legion, Lorgar would redirect this zealotry and use many of the same tactics which had been implemented against humanity to direct them towards the worship of the Emperor against Space Marines of his brother's legions, in order to turn the legions themselves, along with their fathers, towards the worship of the ruinous powers. Throughout the tumult of war, chaos spawned what amounts to undead on Davin's moon. It was during engagements here that he would face a perilous fate. Unknowingly engaged in a battle against a chaos-infested planetary governor, Eugene Temba, Horus fell victim to a poisoned blade, the Keenbrak anathema, which was tainted by the dark deity Nurgle. This blade was originally stolen by Erebus from the Interax civilization, and it had found its way into Temba's hands after he had succumbed to the worship of Nurgle. Mutated and empowered, Temba transformed his Imperial army garrison into an undead plague of zombified monstrosities, compelling the Luna Wolves to confront the abominations. Horus personally clashed with Temba, sustaining a grievous wound from the malevolent living metal, a wound that defied conventional healing, leaving him in a dire state. Exploiting this vulnerability, Erebus swayed the Luna Wolves Warrior Lodge to seek aid from Davinite shamans, who in reality were chaos cultists at the temple of the Serpent Lodge. Despite contradicting the Imperial Truth's doctrines, said shamans were quickly employed by the Luna Wolves in a desperate attempt to save Horus. A dark ritual would unfold within the temple. In an unforeseen turn, Horus's spirit was transported into the Imperium, where a harrowing vision was unfolded, witnessing a future imperial dystopia where the Emperor and a select group of Primarchs were deified. Horus realized the tragic outcome of his actions, and said realization was manipulated by the Chaos Gods in their favor. Meanwhile, Magnus the Red, employing forbidden psychic sorcery, foresaw Horus's descent into chaos and endeavored to forewarn the Emperor. However, Magnus's warnings were transmitted through psychic channels, and he mistakenly breached the psychic defenses at the Imperial Palace. The Emperor, misconstruing the warning as a betrayal due to his decisions on Nicaea, dispatched Leman Russ, the Space Wolves, along with the Sisters of Silence and a group of custodies led by Constantine Valder, to apprehend Magnus for defying the Council of Nicaea's ban on psychic powers within the Imperium. En route to confront Magnus, Horus manipulated Russ, convincing him to launch a devastating assault on Prospero, instead of adhering to the Emperor's orders to bring Magnus to him for a trial. Manipulated by the entities of the Imperium, Magnus would then become eager to confront the Emperor's judgment, and he found himself at the mercy of Horus's cunning manipulation, escalating a catastrophic series of events that would forever alter his fate and the fate of the Imperium. As the era was overshadowed by chaos and betrayal, Isstvan III would occur, a tragic stage where loyalty clashed with treachery, forever altering the fate of the Imperium. Under the veil of secrecy, the Wordbearers Legion had long embraced chaos, and through this they began to prepare to eliminate those who would oppose them. Isstvan III, a planet marred by the pervasive influences of Slaanesh, saw a corrupted planetary governor, Vardus Praal, challenge the Imperium's rule. Charged by the Council of Terra to reclaim this rebellious world, Horus seized the opportunity to unfold a clandestine scheme he and the Wordbearers had laid the groundwork for. All of this was unbeknownst to the Emperor. Gathering his forces, the sons of Horus, the World Eaters, the Death Guard, and the Emperor's children, Horus orchestrated a devastating ploy. After bombarding Isstvan III, he dispatched loyalist astartes under the pretense of reclamation. Yet in a moment of supposed triumph, tragedy struck. Virus bombs, unleashed by Horus's fleet, would descend on these loyalist elements from the traitor legions, decimating the unsuspecting loyalists. In the midst of chaos, Captain Sol Tarvitz and Battle Captain Nathaniel Garrow endeavored to warn their brethren of the impending doom, a heroic attempt that saved some loyalist astartes. However, 8 billion lives on Isstvan III perished horrifically as the lethal virus bombs wrought havoc, resonating throughout the warp to such a degree that it caused the Astronomicon to falter. Amidst the chaos, Primarch Angron of the World Eaters, unsatisfied with the bombardment's efficiency, led a frenzied assault, disregarding strategy for sheer brutality. Horus, incensed by the delay, reinforced Angron's onslaught, transforming the battlefield into a nightmarish realm of slaughter and death. Nevertheless, a glimmer of hope remained, as Battle Captain Garrow escaped on board the damaged frigate known as the Eisenstein, in an event which would later be known as the Flight of the Eisenstein, as he raced to Terra to forewarn the Emperor of Horus's betrayal. However, on Isstvan III, the valiant efforts of Captain Talvitz, Gavriel Loken, and Tarek Targadon continued. Despite delaying Horus's machinations, they would succumb to the overwhelming might of their traitorous brethren. Engulfed in a relentless battle, the Loyalists, though resilient, faced insurmountable odds. Without air support or Titan firepower, yet amidst this turmoil, the sons of Horus and the Emperor's children saw former allies turned foes, pitting brother against brother in a heart-rending conflict. Ultimately, the Loyalists were reduced to a few hundred as they made their final stand, witnessing the Coral City's annihilation by Horus's decree, marking the harrowing conclusion of the Isstvan III atrocity. In the wake of chaos and betrayal, the flight of the Eisenstein heralded a pivotal juncture in the tumultuous events of the heresy, marked by the resilience and a desperate quest to unveil the truth. 70 loyalists from the Death Guard Legion, led by Battle Captain Garo and guided by Imperial Saint Euphrates Keeler, commandeered the ailing Imperial frigate Eisenstein. Their perilous escape from Isstvan III, evading the treacherous clutches of Horus's forces, saw the frigate have a valiant confrontation with the Death Guard battleship Terminus Est, resulting in severe damage to the vessel. Within the Imperium's more secured territory, the horrors would persist as the Eisenstein faced a malevolent assault of Nurgle's minions, including the first known Plague Marines in history. Forced into a crash emergence from the warp, the frigate would endure this nearly insurmountable turmoil, which claimed the lives of all astropaths and mortally wounding the sole navigator. Amidst the chaos, Garo, displaying ingenuity, initiated a desperate signal by self-destructing the frigate's warp drives, which would catch the attention of Primarch Rogel Dorn of the Imperial Fists. Dorn's legion would intercept the distress calls, and eventually there would be an encounter between Dorn and Garo. Initially hesitant and rather perturbed by Garo's tale, Dorn would be swayed by the irrefutable proof provided by Mercedes Oliton, who fled from Horus's very own flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. With conviction, the fortress monastery known as the Phalanx set course for Terra, tasked with delivering the chilling revelation of Horus's betrayal to the Emperor. The fate of the Eisenstein's survivals, however, would remain shrouded by mystery. Upon their arrival in the Luna system, they would be sequestered within a tower commanded by the Sisters of Silence. Garo, his loyal Death Guard comrades, and Captain Lacton Querzel of the Luna Wolves would encounter a Death Guard Marine, Solun Decius, who was afflicted by Nurgle's rot. Succumbing to despair, Solun allowed his possession by a lesser demon of Nurgle, unleashing a harrowing encounter with the Lord of Flies. Their harrowing journey would continue past this, as Garo, Captain Querzel, and Captain Querz met Malcador the Sigillite, the Emperor's right hand, and his regent, who tasked them with an arduous mission, ordered to seek out 7 astartes across both traitor and loyalist legions. They were destined to become the founding members of the Imperial Inquisition and the formidable demon-hunting forces known as the Grey Knights, instrumental in the defense of humanity against the chaotic tides threatening its very existence. To better understand what led the forces to where they were, we must delve into the tangled web of alliances and ideological clashes as we spot and focus on 2 pivotal events which occurred during the onset of the Horus Heresy, namely the Lair Campaign and the Campaign of Chondax, which would reveal the intricate dynamics and alliances amongst the Legion Astartes. Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's Children, led his legion into conflict against the Lair, an alien race discovered in the Larian star system. The Xenos, resembling the pursuit of perfection which the Emperor's children and their Primarch were so known for, faced annihilation as Fulgrim vehemently rejected the idea of coexistence with such an alien race. The ensuing war displayed unparalleled feats of adaptation and warfare, pitting humanity against a highly evolved foe. Despite the immense casualties, Fulgrim would eventually claim victory, solidifying his belief in humanity's superiority, and through humanity, his own superiority. Meanwhile, a stratagem orchestrated by the traitorous War Master Horus diverted the White Scars Legion, entangling them in a lengthy campaign against the Orcs and the Alpha Legion operatives stationed within the area. The White Scars, unaware of the heresy's unfolding, fought valiantly, encountering deceitful messages and ambushes orchestrated by the Alpha Legion, all the while decimating the Orcs they faced. The Khan's decisive action and cunning allowed the White Scars to escape the Alpha Legion's blockade, as they would go out into the unknown, seeking truth amidst the chaos, even disregarding the Space Wolves' pleas for aid due to being unsure whether they were aligned with those who had attacked them. This tumultuous period also witnessed another pivotal event, the Council of Nicaea, a significant gathering initiated by the Emperor in order to deliberate the usage of psychic abilities within the Imperium. Though termed a council, its contentious debates sowed the seeds of dissent, particularly felt by the Thousand Sons Legion, leading them to dub it the Trial of Magnus the Red. This event would significantly shape the fate of the Imperium, and would actually be one of the cornerstones needed for the traitors' ascent during the heresy. In a complex interplay of loyalties, conflicts, and strategic maneuvers, these campaigns and councils underscored the intricacies and fractures within the Imperium that set the stage for the cataclysmic events of the Horus Heresy. As this convoluted saga of anathemas, seemingly unassuming yet potent weapons, their sinister capabilities, and insidious influences on pivotal events during the heresy came to light. In particular, as the tendrils of chaos tightened their grip upon the fabric of the Imperium, Horus, once the venerable War Master, strategically aligned himself and his pieces on the galactic chessboard. The labyrinthian machinations that fueled his eventual rebellion most definitely had begun prior to the plans of the forlorn events on Isstvan III. Horus, a master puppeteer, had manipulated the Primarchs, Angron, Mortarion, Fulgrim, and Lorgar, and even Conrad Kurz, into the murky folds of chaos, each driven by personal vendettas or promises of power, as they would succumb to the allure granted by the dark gods and rebellion against their father. Meanwhile, loyalist legions such as the Dark Angels, Blood Angels, and Ultramarines were dispatched on distant missions, carefully orchestrated to keep them as far away from Terra as possible and away from the impending tempest on Isstvan. The Imperial Fists and White Scars were poised on the precipice of loyalty, remained beyond Horus's direct reach, as Jagatai Khan's allegiance hung in the balance, which was misconstrued by the War Master as him potentially becoming an ally. In a futile attempt, Fulgrim would also seek to sway Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands, only to be met with defiance and a vow of vengeance made on Isstvan V, which would seal Manus' fate. The traitor Primarchs' destinies unfolded. Conrad Kurz, in particular, had a disdain for an impending retribution he had seen through visions. Alfarius and Omegons misjudged or misguided loyalty, and Pederabo's embittered rivalry with Rogel Dorn all became catalysts for corruption. The Thousand Sons themselves were a most tragic of cases. Initially adverse to betrayal, they were ensnared by a twisted plot woven by Tzeentch, and would ultimately succumb to chaos due to the unforeseen circumstances triggered by Leman Russ's ruthless assault on Prospero. As the atrocities on Isstvan V occurred, the loyalist Space Marine legions of the Raven Guard, Salamanders, and Iron Hands were torn asunder. However, them, along with the Space Wolves, would stand resolute against the encroaching darkness. But as the looming battles continued to exact tolls, especially on those without the unyielding loyalty of the Space Wolves, it would appear Horus would not be content with just the corruption of Primarchs alone, as he would go on to court the Adeptus Mechanicus, bending Magus Regulus to his cause with the allure of standard template construct databases yet unknown. This unholy alliance ensured the flow of crucial Adeptus Mechanicus and Titan support to the traitor forces. In tandem with Horus and his sinister confidant, Erebus would engage in a ritual to commune with the warp. A demon named Scarel emerged as the emissary of chaos, weaving a web of deception and malady around Horus, deceiving him into believing that chaos sought only to thwart the Emperor's alleged eradication plan, as he pledged his loyalty to Chaos Undivided after implementing the horrors of Isstvan III and V. As the chessboard neared its final moves on the onset of this climactic war, the dark tendrils of chaos entwined ever more closely and tightly upon the destiny of the Imperium, setting the stage for the climactic events that would unfold after Isstvan. It appears this is where we must leave off for now, as in order to avoid any trace of this being followed back to me and the rogue trader who is so kindly allowing me respite on his ship, I must terminate this servitor. However, worry not, the next broadcast will dive more deeply into the following events of the Horus Heresy. After a short reprieve, I am glad to be back, so let's jump right in to the climax of the Horus Heresy, the Siege of Terra. In the annals of galactic history, few conflicts rival the epic scale and profound consequences of the Siege of Terra, also known as the Battle of Terra or the Siege of the Imperial Palace. This climactic engagement marked the cataclysmic conclusion of the Horus Heresy, a galaxy-spanning civil war which erupted within the Imperium of Man. In the year 014 M31, Terra, the cradle of humanity and the seat of imperial power, became the stage for a titanic struggle between the traitor forces led by the War Master Horus and the loyalist armies of the Emperor of Mankind. The outcome of this harrowing confrontation would shape the destiny of humanity for millennia to come, marking the true commencement of the Age of the Imperium. Though the loyalist forces ultimately emerged victorious, their triumph came at a staggering cost. The scars of the battle would echo throughout the annals of history. But what events led to the climactic showdown on the throne world? The seeds of this conflict were sown in the aftermath of the treacherous drop site massacre on Isstvan V, where it became painfully clear that 8 of the 18 Space Marine legions had fully turned traitor and set themselves against the Emperor of Mankind, pledging their allegiance to the dark forces of chaos under the banner of Horus. The traitorous forces, bolstered by the elements who were loyal to them within the Imperialis Auxilia and the Mechanicus, along with some of the Titan legions, embarked on a relentless campaign of conquest, their sights firmly on Terra itself. As the traitorous legions converged on Mars, the stage would be set for the final apocalyptic confrontation. Meanwhile, on distant fronts across the galaxy, loyalist forces would scramble to prepare for the impending onslaught. The Imperial Fist, under the stalwart leadership of Primarch Rogaldorn, hastily recalled their scattered forces, while the Ultramarines, battered but unbowed, rallied to defend the realms of Ultramar against the advancing hordes of chaos. Yet amidst the chaos of war, unexpected alliances and betrayals would come to light. The Thousand Sons, driven to desperation by the destruction of their homeworld at the hands of the Space Wolves, pledged their allegiance to Horus and Chaos, adding their formidable psychic might to the traitor cause. As the traitor fleets assembled above Mars, the fate of humanity hung in the balance. With the odds stacked against them, the defenders of Terra knew that their only hope lay in holding the line long enough for reinforcements to arrive. But as the battles raged on, whispers of a greater conspiracy began to surface. What unseen forces were at play behind the scenes, manipulating events to serve their own dark agendas, was a thought on everybody's minds. As the dust settled and the smoke cleared, one thing remained for certain. The Siege of Terra would be remembered as a great and terrible turning point in the annals of human history, as it stood as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming darkness, all the while showing the depths of depravity humanity could reach. In the wake of the devastating drop site massacre, where 9 of the revered Space Marine legions showed themselves to have succumbed to the seductive whispers of chaos, the galaxy stood on the precipice of annihilation, with the War Master Horus boldly renouncing his allegiance to the Emperor of Mankind. The traitors rallied under his banner, plunging the Imperium into a maelstrom of conflict, chaos, and betrayal. Supported by a motley assortment of Imperial Army units, corrupted Mechanicum forces, twisted Titan legions, and a myriad of demons, the traitor forces embarked on a relentless campaign of conquest. No longer bound by the constraints of conventional warfare, they laid waste to entire worlds with wanton destruction and disregard for human lives. Their actions, guided by the insidious influence of the ruinous powers, knew no ends of depravity. As the traitor fleets swept across the galaxy, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake, a chilling pattern emerged. Planets fortunate enough to escape total annihilation would fall under the iron grip of chaos, subjugated to the unspeakable horrors at the hands of their new overlords. Once proud realms of the Imperium were reduced to smoldering ruins, their populations enslaved or slaughtered in the name of the dark gods. Amidst the chaos and despair, a flicker of hope would emerge. The cult of the Letitio Divinatus, which venerated the emperor as a divine figure, due to it beginning to gain traction amongst the beleaguered populace, gave humanity a hope, as prayers for deliverance would echo across a war-torn Imperium. The stage was set for a conflict of an unparalleled magnitude. A struggle that would determine the fate of humanity itself had begun. During the Horus Heresy, one pivotal event stands out as a rather dark chapter in galactic history, creating waves that would reverberate all the way to the 41st millennium, the Schism of Mars. As the War Master had marshaled his forces for rebellion against the Emperor, he recognized the crucial importance of securing support from the Adeptus Mechanicus, the custodians of the Imperium's most advanced technologies. Utilizing his unparalleled charisma and persuasive skills, Horus managed to sway many tech adepts of the Mechanicum to his cause, promising them access to long-lost standard template constructs, technologies supposedly recovered by his Sons of Horus Legion. And so he would kindle the spark of rebellion, in particular those who did not view the Emperor as the Omnissiah, which was a group that had drastically grown in size during the Great Crusade. But it was the fateful alliance forged with Kelbor Hal, the rather strange Fabricator General of Mars, which proved to be a turning point. Sensing an opportunity to assert the Mechanicum's autonomy under Horus's rule, Kelbor Hal pledged his allegiance to the War Master, sealing their pact with forbidden knowledge obtained from the vaults of Moravec, knowledge that had been sealed away by the Emperor himself, for it was tainted with the corrupting power of chaos. With the opening of the vaults, a malevolent force was unleashed upon Mars, corrupting its once pure technology with the insidious influence of chaos. The resultant chaos and confusion sparked open warfare across the Red Planet, as loyalists and traitor forces clashed in a deadly struggle for dominance. The interceding conflict became known as the Schism of Mars, and it paralleled the greater conflict consuming the Imperium, as brother turned against brother and titans clashed in a climactic battle for supremacy. Every aspect of the Imperium seemed to be tearing itself apart. Driven by the dark machinations of the Dark Mechanicum, those which would now lend their skills and knowledge to Horus's cause, unleashed untold devastation upon the loyalist forces, as the fires of rebellion would continue to spread throughout the galaxy. As the fate of humanity now hung on the balance, as it teetered on the brink of oblivion, the traitor legion's insidious advance bore a singular objective: the conquest of Terra. For Horus, this conquest held the promise of ultimate victory, the culmination of his pact with the dark entities of chaos, and the overthrow of the Emperor of Mankind himself. The traitors, comprising of the Sons of Horus, the Death Guard, the Emperor's children, World Eaters, and the Word Bearers, converged upon Mars in preparation for their assault. Meanwhile, a large segment of the Word Bearers Legion set their sights on Calth, aiming to vanquish Reboot Guilliman and his Ultramarines. Rogel Dorn, the Primarch of the Imperial Fists, and Malcador the Sigillite, Regent of the Imperium, grasped the gravity of the situation as survivors of the drop site massacre on Isstvan V sought refuge on Terra. With a resolve born of desperation, Dorn ordered all loyalist forces back to Terra, even as the Space Wolves grappled with the Alpha Legion's treacherous ambushes. Across the galaxy, conflict would rage. The Ultramarines on Calth were besieged by segments of the Word Bearers as they fought valiantly to bolster the defenses, all the while the strategic acumen of Reboot Guilliman allowed an evening of the playing field, even though segments of the World Eaters had also joined in. Rallied under the leadership of heroes like Brother Captain Bentaos, hope seemed to flicker amidst a chaotic maelstrom of war. In the eastern fringe, the Night Lords clashed with the Dark Angels, while the Iron Warriors engaged the Imperial Fists near Isstvan V. Amidst this tumult, the Blood Angels would triumph over the forces of chaos, vanquishing two greater demons, one of Khorne and the other of Slaanesh, as they would make way to reach Terra. Amidst this gathering storm, another threat would emerge. Magnus the Red, the Primarch of the Thousand Suns, pledged his allegiance to Horus and Chaos after the destruction of large amounts of his legion at the hands of the Space Wolves. What remained of his legion would now be en route to Terra in order to bolster the traitor forces. As the traitor legions closed in on Terra, the White Scars and Blood Angels would stand alongside Dorn and the Imperial Fists in their defense of humanity's cradle. With the fate of mankind hanging in the balance, 3 entire legions and millions of Imperial soldiers would prepare for a battle which would echo for millennia to come. As the dark clouds of war gathered over Terra, the siege commenced with a relentless onslaught from Horus's fleet, which rained down destruction on the planet's surface. Despite the valiant efforts from the defenders, the formidable orbital defense station on Luna, the sheer might of the traitor legions proved overwhelming. Wave after wave of loyalist soldiers and ships were swept aside by the ferocity of the assault. With Terra's defenses weakened, Chaos Space Marines descended upon the planet, marring its surface with drop pods, targeting key strategic locations with ruthless precision. Their objective to secure vital spaceports in anticipation of the main onslaught. A coalition of 5 traitor legions, bolstered by their insidious allies from the warp, and the traitorous Auxilia spearheaded the invasion, plunging Terra into unremitted horror and chaos unimaginable. Amidst the chaos of the dark rituals which unfolded as chaos cultists summoned forth greater demons and unleashed unholy terror upon the beleaguered defenders, the Eternity Wall and the Lion's Gate spaceports became bastions of Imperial resistance. However, even with the valiant efforts of the Primarch Sanguinius and the great Jagatai Khan, these bastions would eventually fall under the traitors' relentless onslaught. As traitor transports deposited legions of soldiers, tanks, corrupted titans, and even demons onto the surface of Terra, the defenders fought fiercely, knowing that the fate of humanity itself hung in the balance. Though the skies blazed with the fury of defense lasers, the countless traitor hordes would breach the atmosphere, swelling the ranks of the besiegers. In the crucible of battle, many of the traitors, now demons to different extents, would be slain by the loyalists, as Terra would stand resolute, their resolve unyielding in the face of overwhelming odds. On their shoulders rested not only the fate of their homeworld and their emperor, but the destiny of all mankind, as the dark clouds of chaos continued to envelop Terra, plunging the very world itself into a pocket of the warp. The harrowing siege would unfold, marked by moments of both heroism and despair. The traitor legions, driven by their fervent allegiance to chaos, besieged the Imperial Palace, determined to crush the last bastions of resistance. Angron, a once noble Primarch, turned into a vile demon prince of Khorne, stood before the walls of the palace and demanded their surrender in his own bestial manner. Yet his challenge would be swiftly met, and he would be slain by the angelic Sanguinius, leader of the Blood Angels, and the great angel of the Imperium, who had already fought one of the favored demons of Khorne, Kabanda, and brought the beast down with his very own might. Their exchange shook the fabric of the very world they fought in. At times their suns would feel as if comets were flying overhead. The very Space Marine legions would be swept aside by the very blows of their fathers. This reflected a tragic microcosm of the rift between brothers torn asunder by war. Once the Eternity Gate was closed, the defenders, now within the palace, faced a relentless assault as demons began to appear from the corpses of those who lay within. During the siege, the defensive forces, led on the battlefield by Sanguinius and bolstered by the valiant efforts of Jagatai Khan, Primarch of the White Scars, became the bulwark of the defenders of humanity. All the while, the great Rogel Dorn continued to lead defensive efforts, managing every soldier, every troop from one of the final bastions of humanity. Yet as the traitors breached the palace walls, with the aid of the Titan legions, the defenders would be pushed to the brink of collapse. In a daring maneuver, Jagatai Khan would redirect his forces to claim the Lion's Gate spaceport, thereby disturbing the traitor legions' supply lines and buying precious time for the embattled defenders all across the cradle of humanity. Within the palace's very walls, echoes of Sanguinius' confrontation with the bloodthirster Kabanda and their titanic clash of wills reverberated and gave hope to the beleaguered defenders of humanity. Despite the injuries suffered from both titanic battles, the great angel rose once more, his indomitable spirit fueling a defiant stand against the encroaching darkness. As the Eternity Gate had been closed, the Loyalists were given fleeting moments of respite as they settled themselves in defensive positions within the palace walls. Yet the battle was far from over, and the fate of Terra hung in the balance as the forces of chaos continued their relentless assault. and the War Master's very vessel would begin to encroach on the palace itself. Now, deep beneath the palace halls, the mysterious warp gate which the Emperor had created in order to segment a sector of the webway for humanity demanded relentless vigilance in order to stave the runoff of chaos attempting to enter the Earth from this now unclosable portal. This was all due to the insidious machinations of Tzeentch and his now favored pawn, Magnus the Red, who had unwittingly played into the hands of Horus and become a treacherous cur through his disobedience of the Emperor and the unmitigated use of his potent psychic sorceries, eviscerating the protective barriers which the Emperor had so painstakingly set to protect this segment of the webway from being granted access to the unholy, as Magnus's psychic mastery had allowed the destabilizing of the Emperor's delicate control. Now the Emperor's focus had been consumed with the task of preventing a catastrophic breach between Terra and the Warp. With the burden of safeguarding the Imperium's future weighing heavily on him, the Emperor would entrust Malcador the Sigillite with a solemn duty. He was to command Vulcan to enter the webway in order to strike down Magnus and create an opening for Malcador to assume the Emperor's place on the Golden Throne in order to function as a psychic amplifier and shield humanity from this newly constructed intersection between the webway and the warp. This role had originally been intended for Magnus. However, when his allegiance had faltered, Malcador would stand as the last bastion of humanity's hope, wielding his own psychic might, which was only matched by a scant few, but could not compare to that of the Emperor. In the shadow of the impending doom of humanity, as the final confrontation with Horus loomed large, the Emperor had imparted upon Malcador a grim foreboding prophecy, as the burden of Malcador's own irrefutable demise weighed heavily on his shoulders. As now mounted on the Golden Throne, Malcador prepared himself for the unimaginable trial and his assured end. Malcador would now be protected by Vulcan, who would in essence hold a dead man's switch, designed to wipe out the entirety of the Sol system in order to strike back at chaos and allow humanity even the faintest hope of survival. The Emperor now joined with a handful of his final remaining custodies, along with a still injured Primarch Sanguinius and the Angel's brother Rogel Dorn, would face their divine duty as they would answer Horus's ultimatum. In a few short years, it seemed that the Imperium had essentially shrunk from a galaxy-conquering empire to a singular, solitary room. As the galactic conflict would reach its climax, the defenders of Terra found themselves facing an onslaught of unprecedented scale, and it was at this moment that Horus's ship lowered its shielding. It seemed that despite the valiant efforts of the Loyalists, all they had left was a Hail Mary pass, cutting the head off the snake itself by boarding Horus's ship, even though they knew this was a trap. As the Siege of Terra entered its twilight hours, it was heralded by an unending onslaught of orbital bombardments. As the history of humanity was nearly erased, the directed onslaught on the palace itself lasted all of 30 solar days. However, within the submerged segment of the warp that Terra was, time was immaterial, and with the sky set ablaze, the traitor legions would now be bombarded by the Avenging Sun's very fleets. Primarch Robert Guilliman was now entering the fray. In a message to his brother Sanguinius, he begged for the defenders of Terra to hold out for merely a few more days, as he, elements of the Dark Angels, and the Space Wolves had entered the Sol system and had been eliminating the fleets of Chaos. However, his words would go unheeded, as the Emperor, Sanguinius, Constantine Valdor, and Dorn would all board Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, in a desperate gambit to save humanity. And it is here where I'm going to leave things off, at the climax of the heresy itself. Next time I'll pick up right where we left off, as the Emperor and his small strike force boarded the Vengeful Spirit. As the last dying embers of the Horus Heresy burned out, the dust started to settle on the ravaged battlegrounds of Terra, as a haunting stillness descended upon the besieged world. Outside the imposing Eternity Gate, it appeared that hope was dwindling, as desperate survivors clung to life, forming ragtag alliances amidst the chaos. Titans, once symbols of indomitable power, now hung like grim crucifixes along the fortress walls, while the relentless onslaught of the World Eaters and the other Chaos Legions transformed armored behemoths into macabre monuments of destruction. In the shadows of the besieged palace, the White Scars valiantly would defend the Lionsgate spaceport, their resolve tested by the relentless barrages from the traitor fleet. But amidst the carnage, a more insidious threat loomed. Terra itself had been inexorably drawn into a malevolent embrace by the warp. Time itself seemed to bend and twist, with clocks frozen in perpetual stagnation, trapping the embattled defenders in a nightmarish limbo that never seemed to end. The survivors would speak of years passing within the confines of a single day, their minds grappling with the unfathomable distortion of reality. But perhaps most unsettling was the shifting geometry of Terra itself. Landscapes would be warped out of place, the streets would now lead to nowhere, and the very fabric of existence unraveled before the eyes of the Imperial defenders. Loken, a stalwart defender of the Emperor, found himself displaced, transported vast distances within the labyrinthine corridors of the Imperial Palace. For the stalwart Imperial fists, masters of strategy and fortification, this phenomena struck a deep chord of fear, shattering their illusions of preparedness. Yet amidst the chaos, a glimmer of insight emerged from the brilliant Malcador the Sigillite. Far from a stroke of fortune for the forces of chaos, this temporal anomaly would in essence be a grave miscalculation, a misstep in their grand design. While the Loyalists resigned themselves to the inevitability of defeat, trapped in the endless cycles of the day of their demise, chaos unwittingly granted them a fleeting reprieve, a respite before the final reckoning. Amidst the whispers of prophecy and legend, the true nature of the Emperor himself was laid bare. Once hailed as heroes and legendary conquerors without peer, such as Alexander the Great and St. George, the very embodiment of divinity, despite his protestations. Yet even amidst the chaos of war, the echoes of ancient conquest resounded, tales of toppled towers, and the betrayal that shattered the unity of an empire. The story of the Tower of Babel echoed once again, as it seemed that history repeated itself as a monument to mankind's hubris fell yet again. Memories of All-Person, once a war master and a trusted ally who had become the instrument of fate, his blade striking at the heart of the Emperor's vision, flooded into the periphery of the not yet God Emperor's mind. As the fate of Terra hung in the balance, amidst the shifting sands of time and the clash of empires, history seemed to unfold itself, a mystery yet unraveled, as its secrets began to be laid bare, amidst the ruins of a shattered world. The tumult of war raged unabated, as a new chapter unfolded amidst the hallowed halls of the embattled Terra. Horus, who had once been a paragon of martial prowess and strategic acumen, now found himself ensnared in the tendrils of madness. Delusions plagued his fractured minds, blurring the lines between reality and fantasy. In his distorted reprieve, fallen comrades now walked amongst the living. Even his brother, Ferris, spoke to him, as their spectral presences haunted his every waking moment. Whispers, both real and imagined, echoed in the corridors of his consciousness, as these insidious murmurs were driving him ever closer to the brink of true madness. But amidst the chaos of his unraveling psyche, Horus clung to a desperate gambit, born of desperation and delusion. With Guilliman and the Lion closing in on Terra, his schemes to deliver a fatal blow to the Imperium's heart, his envisioning of the Emperor slain at his feet, a macabre offering to quell the resolve of all his would-be adversaries, seemed to be fleeting. For Horus, time was a merciless foe, a specter on a two-front war which loomed large on the horizon. With Guilliman and the Lion's advancing fleets threatening to split his forces, he saw but one path to victory, a swift and decisive strike which would end the Emperor himself. Yet even as Horus danced on the precipice of madness, dark forces gathered at his behest, drawn by the promise of bloodshed and chaos. Dracnian, Bellicor, and Nikar, amongst other hosts of demons, were summoned forth from their infernal hiding place, their presences casting a shadow to entomb the world of Terra in a timeless, unending day. These malevolent beings would wage a war on a scale unseen since the dawn of time, their insatiable hunger for destruction driving their power ever forward. Meanwhile, amidst the clamor of battle, a lone voice cried out in desperation. Malcador, ever the steadfast advisor to the Emperor, beseeches his lord for guidance. Yet his pleas seem to fall on deaf ears. The Golden Throne, a bastion of ancient power, would rack the Emperor's form in agonizing torment. Yet even amidst the throes of his own anguish, he continued to labor tirelessly in order to defend what little of humanity was left on his homeworld. With a silent resolve born of unyielding determination, he reached out across the void to be a lighthouse in the darkness to lead his sons home. And so the Battle of Terra would rage on, as the fate of the galaxy now truly hung on the balance. To either side a precipice, voids with no end, with Horus poised to deliver a killing blow, and the Emperor's strength waning each passing moment. The stage was set for a confrontation of unparalleled magnitude. In this crucible of war, where alliances had been forged and destinies decided, it seemed that amidst the chaos, one truth would remain immutable, that even in the face of annihilation, the indomitable spirit of humanity still endured. Amidst the swirling chaos and the unending battles for the fate of Terra, the Emperor's resolve had been steeled. As the gravity of the moment struck all those around him, he summoned his foremost trusted allies, Vulcan, Sanguinius, Dorn, and Valdor, all stalwart champions of the Imperium. His last bastions of hope on his beleaguered homeworld were beckoned to the Golden Throne, their destinies entwined with the looming crescendo of this terrible war. In a poignant display of camaraderie, Sanguinius, the great angel, would bestow a heartfelt praise upon his brothers, not just those of blood, but those of conviction, which included Valdor. His words suffered with a poignant mixture of adoration and sorrow, yet amidst the tender embrace of brotherhood, tensions simmered beneath. Valdor, stoic and resolute, would rebuff Sanguinius' overtures with a frigid detachment born of duty. But even as the bonds of brotherhood were tested, the Emperor's gaze remained fixed upon the vengeful spirit and the looming battle which had been set by the conflagrations of chaos. Horus Lupercal, his fallen son, was now his greatest adversary, and his death was the only hope humanity had left. With the shields of the enemy's vessel lowered, an opportunity presented itself, one which they knew too well was a trap, but this was the chance to strike a decisive blow against the forces of chaos and turn the tides of battle in the favor of humanity. With unwavering resolve and a commitment born of desperation, the Emperor issued his commands, marshalling what little forces remained in this final room. In a desperate gambit, Dorn and Valdor would be tasked with accompanying him on this perilous mission. Their martial prowess would only be matched by the third champion of the Emperor joining them on what they all knew was a suicide mission. For Sanguinius, the weight of prophecy bore a heavy burden upon his shoulders. His wounds from Angron's brutal assault and his battle with Kabanda served as a grim reminder of his inescapable fate. Yet even in the face of certain doom, he remained steadfast in his resolve, determined to defy destiny and confront Horus in a final climactic showdown. As the Emperor and his chosen champions prepared for their ultimate confrontation, Malcador, the ever-steadfast servant of the Emperor, would take his place upon the Golden Throne. With the weight of the galaxy pressing down upon him, he knew his death was near. All he could do was buy time for his lord and his lord's fateful sons. As the power of this ancient device began to tear the man asunder, his mind was ablaze with knowledge of his final fateful task. But what of Vulcan? He had been charged with the keys to a weapon that would obliterate the entire Sol system in a single blow, only to be used if the Emperor's Gambit failed, in the hopes that the blast would be strong enough to eviscerate all the traitors and give humanity hope beyond hope of survival. And now the final act of the saga unfolded, as the defenders of Terra braced themselves for an onslaught unlike any to come. The remaining commanders of the Imperial Fist assumed the leadership of the bastions they could. One such great warrior was Archimus, whose resolve had been tempered by the weight of responsibility as he guided a patchwork brotherhood from the remaining defenders of Terra. Unfortunately, during their transition into Horus's flagship, Dorn, the ever-stoic Primarch of the Imperial Fists found himself cast adrift in a desolate desert, surrounded by the silent specters of his fallen brothers, as time moved separately from all reality. With each passing century, the memories of the Siege of Terra faded from his mind, replaced by the insidious whispers of Khorne, the Blood God, who promised an end to all the burdens of strategy and planning in exchange for a life of unbridled carnage and bloodshed. Meanwhile, Sanguinius, the noble father of the Blood Angels, and to many the Emperor's greatest son, along with a handful of his sons, were separated once they had boarded the infamous Vengeful Spirit. At the same time, the Emperor and his custodians would materialize amidst a scene of utter chaos, as their minds were assaulted with the overwhelming presences of the warp. It seemed that in this place, outside of reality, half of the custodians, their bodies driven mad against their will by the influences of all the Chaos Gods who had manifested through Horus, turned on their master, their eyes seeping with blood as their bodies were used to launch a frenzied assault. Yet amidst this carnage, it seemed there was a singular hope. It seemed that not just Horus could draw upon the powers of the warp from here, but the Emperor could feed his beleaguered strength. It seemed that by saturating the Vengeful Spirit with the energies of the warp, Horus had unwittingly provided the Emperor with a weapon, one which would allow him to harness the very forces of chaos against their masters. As this great drama unfolded, it seemed that a subplot would become known. While inside the hallowed halls of Terra, All-Person, a figure which had been shrouded in mystery and stood beside the Emperor for eons prior to him becoming known as the Emperor, was accompanied by a motley band of allies. Amongst them, Hecate, a witch whose true identity was Cyrene from Monarchia, along with the venerated John Grammaticus, who at this point was a reluctant participant in the deadly games of subterfuge, who had learned of the Alpha Legion's grand design and bid his time in order to intervene at the eventual vector of the siege, where humanity would perish or survive. It seemed Alpharius had revealed a startling shift in allegiance, as it would appear that segments of the Alpha Legion had thrown their lot in with the beleaguered defenders of Terra, beneath the labyrinthine corridors of the palace, within long-buried dungeons and tunnels which had been concealed even from the scrutinizing gaze of Perturabo, served as conduits for the clandestine movements of the Alpha Legion, their depths stocked with weapons and awaiting warriors, who upon their command would either serve Terra and protect humanity, or bring the Imperium down on its knees. However, amidst the chaos of war, a tragic turn of events would unfold. Mathis Herzog, a mere pawn for the machinations of chaos, would meet his end at the hands of John Grammaticus and his merry band, his own ambitions thwarted by the cold hands of fate. But even as victory seemed close, the pawn had merely been a distraction. Cyrene would trigger Ingo Pecha's dormant, trained allegiance, unleashing a maelstrom of violence and destruction. However, bound by the weight of his own treachery and ensnared in a deadly trap, Ingo chose sacrifice as his final gambit, and so one of the last hopes for humanity would be crushed without the Emperor or his Primarchs ever knowing. As this was happening, in the shadowy recesses of the Hollow Mountain, Foe, a singular being who could create a weapon unlike any other, completed the designs of a masterpiece, one which would eliminate all those connected to the Astartes. He had teamed up with a gene witch from Selenar, as they orchestrated a cunning ploy in order to delay his executions at the hands of the custodians. Meanwhile, Corswain, one of the final defenders of humanity, would extend a tentative hand of cooperation towards Zahariel and his companions. Inspired by Corswain's unwavering resolve, Zahariel looked to enlist his own aid in their quest to sway the allegiance of the remaining Dark Angels to their cause. But even as alliances had been forged and betrayals unfolded, the machinations of fate continued to weave their intricate webs, as the arrival of Reboot Gillerman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, was delayed as chaos shifted reality. It seemed that their censors did not pick a singular vengeful spirit, but instead the entirety of the Sol system had been subsumed by the vengeful spirit. All radar and indications showed not hundreds, not thousands, but an infinite and ever-expanding number of vengeful spirits, all as real as the next, blockading any hope of arrival on the planet. In the heart of this maelstrom, Abaddon, the commander of the Sons of Horus issued a desperate command for his forces to retreat to the safety of the Vengeful Spirit. However, it seemed that even under his command, the chaos of battle had caused discipline to waver. As only a few heeded his call, it seemed their loyalty had been fractured by the relentless onslaught of war. And amidst this chaos, Nathaniel Garrow, an agent of the Sigillite, embarked on his fateful journey into the depths of the Imperial Library. There, amidst the hidden tomes of forbidden knowledge, he would stumble onto a doorway into the very heart of the enemy's domain. He found a way into the Vengeful Spirit. And as the pieces of this puzzle fell into place, it seemed the whispers of prophecy and destiny reverberated all throughout the halls of the palace, as it seemed the prophecy of the Dark King, once associated with the demon Samus, would take on a new significance. As the true nature of Horus's ascension became clear, it was a chilling revelation, as it suggested that humanity stood on the precipice of its own downfall, with Horus poised to ascend as the fifth Chaos God and a harbinger of destruction and despair. This truly was the final act of the heresy, as the galaxy stood in the balance, poised on the edge of oblivion, in this crucible of an unending war, where heroes rose and fell in the thousands, their destinies entwined with the unfolding drama of a familial squabble and the machinations of cackling gods. However, it seemed that fate was fickle this day, as the title of the Dark King would take a new and chilling significance, as it would be revealed to all that the true bearer of the mantle was none other than the Emperor himself. Now on the Vengeful Spirit, by harnessing and imbibing every ounce of power from the warp that he could muster to confront Horus, the Emperor began his own apotheosis, as he was on the precipice to ascending godhood. Yet amidst the chaos of uncertainty, distant voices emerged from the ranks of both friend and foe. Erebus, the architect of treachery and deceit, would whisper words of temptation into the ears of Abaddon, promising victory regardless of the outcome. For Erebus, the ascension of the Emperor as a new god of ruin would herald a future where the Chaos Gods would reign supreme. The balance of power no longer split between four, as it was all but assured the fall of mankind would come. But in the face of such dire portraits, hope still stood. All-Person and Nathaniel Garrow, along with their allies, had embarked on a daring assault into the Vengeful Spirit in order to persuade the Emperor from relinquishing his newfound power, lest he pave the way for a creation of yet another malevolent deity, one who would consume humanity, much like She Who Thirsts had done to the Eldar. As the Emperor's sacrifice reverberated across the galaxy, as he not only surrendered the newfound power that he had garnered, one which set him above any mortal. Even demigods could not hope to stand against such power, but it was not just power that he gave away. In lieu of power, the Emperor sought to remove weakness, and so he would sever his humanity from his soul and cast it off into the warp. A child born of a star which never was. He would face Horus, not with the might of armies, but with the strength of resolve and the power of belief. Amidst this chaos, Valder and the Custodians engaged in a desperate struggle against the Sons of Horus, who had boarded the Vengeful Spirit, led by the formidable Abaddon. In a swirling melee, Valder caught a glimpse of Abaddon's marker tag, and he would descend upon him. But as his legendary spear pierced the Astartes' flesh, visions of the future came. A future where humanity would be embroiled in an unending war, and the great threat of the Despoiler would now stand as tantamount. As this was going on, Sanguinius, the noble Primarch of the Blood Angels, confronted Horus in a breathtaking duel of epic proportions. Even with his injured, exhausted body, each soaring maneuver and lightning-fast strike would come faster than any other performed previously. Sanguinius had sought to exploit the chink in Horus's armor, goading his adversary with false bravado into making a fatal mistake. Yet as the battle progressed, and even in the fleeting moments where victory seemed assured for the Angel, Horus would draw deeper and deeper into his dark powers granted to him by the four Chaos Gods, defying the laws of space and time to ensnare Sanguinius in a deadly embrace. Despite his valiant efforts, Sanguinius was grievously wounded, his body battered and broken by the merciless onslaught of his godly foe. In the heart-wrenching climax, Sanguinius' defiance was extinguished when, amidst the final cathedrals within the vengeful spirit, Horus struck the killing blow. The angel's once proud form had now been reduced to a lifeless husk. As his broken body lay discarded on the blood-stained floor of the vengeful spirit, the shadows themselves seemed to stir, heralding the arrival of unspeakable horrors who would claim their prize. It seemed Horus's plan to turn his brothers, Valdor and the Emperor, to his side had all but failed, and Sanguinius' now crucified body would be hung on the sepulchre of this unholy church. And so Horus became resolute, since he had already paid a price for victory. A price in sacrifice. The sacrifice of his most beloved brother, which would now be an eternal reminder of the futility of resistance, whether it be the resistance against fate or against the War Master himself, mattered not to Horus, as he prepared himself for his future confrontations. Far away from Terra, Perturabo, the Lord of Iron, found himself between conflicting impulses, his rational mind urging him to kneel before Horus, while his inner fury and petulance begged him to rebel against such submission. In the seclusion of his command ship, Perturabo grappled with the weight of the decision on his hands. His hands, once skilled in the craft of creation, now wielded his great intellect in fits of impotent rage, shattering the very symbols of his authority. Yet amidst the chaos of his emotions, a steely resolve began to take shape. He had become determined to confront Horus on his own terms and defy the chains of fate which bound him to his brother's service. For Perturabo, the path to victory lied not within the trappings of symbolism and the capricious whims of warped magics, but in the cold hard logic of war. With his and his legion's grim determination, he poured over the streams from Terra, analyzing every shred of intelligence for the tactical advantages he would need to usurp his brother. Yet beneath the stoic resolve, doubts would linger. Could he truly forge himself into the perfect weapon, one capable of striking down his former comrades in arms and his most powerful of brothers? Can he reconcile the cost of such power with the toll it would exact upon what little he had left? And as the Battle of Terra would now reach a fever pitch, Perturabo stood at a crossroads of destiny, his fate entwined with the fate of the galaxy itself. In this crucible of war, he had to confront not just his enemies on the battlefield, but the demons that dwelled within his own soul. For his opposition was not only from the loyalists, but from every traitor who still remained. In essence, the best outcome for Perturabo would be if the Emperor and Horus took each other out. Further still within the dark reaches of the galaxy, Lorgar, once a staunch supporter of Horus, had now retreated to the shadows as he plotted his own dark agenda. His betrayal now shrouded in obscurity. Sequestered far away from the front lines, Lorgar had begun to sow the seeds of chaos worship amongst unsuspecting inhabitants of a myriad of worlds. Some so disconnected from the rest of humanity that they had not even noticed the great interstellar civil war. Erebus, his loyal acolyte, would transmit news of the events unfolding on Terra, as the great Lorgar Aurelian would receive visions of an angel's death and a figure nailed to a crimson throne, unable to move for the foreseeable future. For Lorgar, this vision offered a glimmer of opportunity, a chance to strike at not just the heart of the Imperium, but at a now potentially faltering Horus, as he interpreted this as the War Master succeeding but being grievously injured and bound to his throne of power. With this information, he began to marshal his forces, preparing to unleash devastation upon not just the hopeless populations of Terra, but on his own traitorous kin. Yet amidst the flames of destruction, doubt still seemed to linger. Lorgar, never one to be truly counted amongst the most formidable of his brothers, had to consider, could he truly bend the tides of fate to his will, or would his ambition consume him, as all things had been consumed by chaos? As the wheels of destiny turned, the fate of Lorgar Aurelian hung in the balance. As the harrowing events on Terra unfolded, and the traitors lurched ever closer to vanquishing every last Space Marine upon Terra, a climactic shockwave reverberated through reality, sending tremors of dread and unimaginable rage across the ranks of every Blood Angel. In the midst of this chaos, each and every member of the Blood Angels Legion was gripped with nightmarish visions, each more terrifying than the last, as they lost control of themselves, and in their wrath gained a portion of their father's legendary strength, but lost all control. Ralderon, one of the greatest heroes of the Blood Angels, felt the cold grip of claws tearing through his flesh. Furio witnessed the gruesome spectacle of Sanguinius being torn asunder by dark forces. Malix Hest felt the crushing weight of a maul raining down upon him relentlessly. Amidst this, Fafnir Ran witnessed the stalwart captain of the Blood Angels' sanguinary guard, the deadly Askelion, lose himself to unending fury, his fanged visage twisted in a picture of malevolence that not even the traitorous astartes surrounding them could match. This was the birth of the Black Rage. Back on the vengeful spirit as Akatane, Witch of Monarchia, shared grim tidings with Rogel Dorn, a sense of foreboding descended upon all the final defenders of Terra, as Dorn set forth on a path that may lead to his ultimate demise. Meanwhile, the Emperor and his remaining retinue of Custodian Guard breached the Sanctum of Horus, only to be met with the unspeakable horror of Sanguinius, the noble angel, once a stalwart servant of the Emperor, now crucified upon a darkened throne, his once proud form twisted in a vile mockery. Back on Terra, as all things seemed lost for the Loyalists, as Blood Angels tore through anything near them, traitor and loyalist alike, a glimmer of hope seemed to emerge. From the unending wrath, Sephon, the bringer of sorrows, emerged, his mind clearing as he came to the aid of Fafnir Ran, as he, amongst other Blood Angels, pulled themselves from the clutches of their psychic tormentors and rallied their shattered forces. It seemed that in their fury, the Blood Angels had been able to tear through so many of those forces who opposed them, that even with the loss of many allies, they were still able to stand a chance. As the battle raged on, the history of the cradle of mankind seemed to be reaching an end. Amidst the chaos of battle, Baldur had now been in pitched combat with the remaining forces of the Word Bearers and the Sons of Horus. At this point, Abaddon, with greater numbers, had orchestrated a perfect encirclement and seemed to hold all the cards. However, Erebus seemed to have a more profound play at hand, as he perceived Abaddon's mastery of the powers of chaos as a skill akin to that of a conductor, wielding a masterful symphony. As he whispered a plea to the would-be despoiler, Erebus urged Abaddon to embrace this power and harness it fully. In a surprising turn of events, Abaddon would acquiesce, calling his forces off and turning his attention to Baldur. The great Justarian of Horus would retreat, leaving Baldur perplexed, questioning the valor and the nobility of the traitorous Space Marines. As that fleeting moment occurred, and within the roar of battle, the glimpses of millennia to come would be whispered to Baldur. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Sigismund and his stalwart warriors would engage in a desperate struggle against the Death Guard, and despite their valor, they found themselves outmatched by an unending, unyielding march forward due to the resilience of their corrupted foes. However, hope seemed to emerge from an unexpected source. Keeler, along with a myriad of refugees, now emboldened by faith and resolve, marched fearlessly towards the enemy, chanting hymns from the Laetitia Divinatum. Keeler and her followers seemed to defy death, confronting the Death Guard with faith and unwavering determination. As they drew closer, a strange power surged through the ranks of the Death Guard, leading them to falter and retreat. In a dramatic turn of events, the remaining Dark Angels, regardless of perceived allegiances, would emerge from the Hollow Mountain and join forces with Sigismund and his remaining warriors, who had shattered the resolve of the implacable Death Guard. Amidst the ruins of the throne room, tensions would escalate further still. Fueled by desperation, the use of foes' devastating anti-Astartes weapon was considered. However, a singular Custodes interjected, insisting upon obtaining Vulcan's authorization first. However, amidst this confusion, Foe, sensing an opportunity to escape his impending doom, attempted to flee, but was swiftly apprehended by the custodian Amon, leading to a questioning about further deferring his execution. as foe was met with Amon's spear. Within the melting confines of the throne room, a surreal scene had unfolded. Human ashes danced upon the air as the Emperor's longest companion, Malcador the Sigillite, was being unmade before the very eyes of Vulcan. The leader of the Salamanders witnessed an unsettling behavior amongst the last few adepts of the Mechanicum within the throne room. It seemed that they had been trapped in a cycle of repetitiveness, completing and restarting their tasks endlessly, mechanically, in a futile attempt in impeding the onslaught of the traitorous forces by maintaining the Golden Throne. Sensing the imminent threats that would come, Vulcan contemplated activating the final measure against the traitors. But whilst trapped on the Golden Throne, his soul being torn asunder, Malcador attempted to reason with Vulcan. Elsewhere, amidst the fray, Horus, driven by a malevolent fury, struck out at the Emperor with a devastating force, sending his father crashing down to the ground. Now nearly immobilized and vulnerable, Horus would take the opportunity to strike out once more, unleashing unending chaotic torrents of unholy lightning upon his fallen foe. And it would be now that the Emperor's valiant companions would leap into the defense of their lord, engaging Horus in a struggle whose end they knew. However, with the time they had bought, the Emperor rose once more, shielding what allies remained from the onslaught. With each clash of the titanic forces, the foundations of the court trembled, as reality bent between the two foes, when in reality it was a battle of 5 against 1. However, far away from the courtroom, as the harrowing battle raged on, Baldur and his dwindling custodian contingent found themselves encircled once more by the Sons of Horus and the Word Bearers. However, in a dramatic twist of fate, Rogel Dorn of the Imperial Fists would arrive to bolster the forces of the embattled Custodes, turning the tide of this skirmish. Meanwhile, still lost in their madness and drawn by the scent of blood and the clamor of battle, the Blood Angels who had joined this strike force descended upon the fray with a ferocity of predatory beasts unseen and unaccounted for by the astartes, both traitor and loyalist alike, striking fear into the hearts of their adversaries. However, Baldur and Dorn were able to break free from the maelstrom of combat. All the while, Erebus delivered a chilling revelation to Abaddon, forewarning of his own waning influence amongst the Chaos Gods. Back on Terra, amidst the Hollow Mountain, Sigismund and his band of refugees, now bolstered by the Dark Angels, eliminated what little was left of the Death Guard assailing them. All the while, the battle between the Emperor and Horus occurred. As Leto and Loken witnessed this climactic cosmic struggle, it seemed that the perceptions of reality diverged. Leto's vision revealed a visceral confrontation within the confines of the decaying vessel, where demonic entities lurked in the shadows, poised to consume the now crucified Sanguinius. Reacting to this ominous threat, Leto stood guard over the body of the Imperium's fallen hero, his own senses now heightened far beyond compare by the palpable aura of malevolence. In stark contrast, Loken's perception transcended the physical realm, as he found himself amidst swirling dimensions of surreal landscapes. Beside a burning figure resembling Malcador, Loken was tantalized with fleeting glimpses of ancient cave paintings concealed within the shadows, compelling him to venture deeper and deeper still into the abyss. Across the vast expanse of space, the Emperor and Horus's climactic battle echoed throughout reality. It seemed the gods of chaos were playing a game with tarot cards, and the possibility of Horus claiming victory by invoking the persona of the Despoiler seemed to be at hand, delivering mighty blows with Worldbreaker, shattering his father's defenses. As this would go on, Dorn would bear the weight of his now wounded comrade, Baldur, whose physiology was no longer healing from the injuries at an acceptable rate, as they both knew they would not be able to make it to the throne room in time to aid the Emperor against his fallen son. It was now that the ever-stoic Dorn confided in Baldur of the tragic news of Sanguinius' demise, and in a poignant moment of vulnerability, Baldur revealed his admiration for the Great Angel, prompting a solemn exchange between the two warriors, and as Dorn contemplated the implications of Baldur's words, suspicions of the underlying meaning made themselves known to Dorn, as they fueled his resolve to confront and slay Horus, leading Baldur to tell Dorn to let him slay Horus, as killing a brother would make Dorn feel guilty. However, Dorn knew the truth behind Baldur's words. The Custodian, in reality, wanted vengeance for the slaying of Sanguinius, a man who not too long ago had claimed him as a brother. As it turns out, Cyrene would embark on a mission to rally any remaining loyalists in order to lead the clandestine gathering and remnants of the Imperial army who had been sheltering in a prison, and as she gathered more and more of the remaining humans, her psychic calls across the warp had been amplified, as impassioned pleas echoed throughout the ether, urging humanity to stand against the traitorous forces and champion the preservation of the Emperor's life. Meanwhile, Loken found himself thrust into what appeared to be a temporal vortex, revealing the harrowing visage of his introduction into the esteemed ranks of the Mournival, as he was surrounded by his erstwhile comrades, such as Abaddon, Aximond, and Torgaradon. Loken would be haunted by visions of Horus perpetually slaying the Emperor across a myriad of dimensions, and as this cosmic scene would unfold, the Custodes accompanying the Emperor were forced to bear witness to the surreal happenings amongst the confines of the vengeful spirit. All the while they were bound by unseen forces, as some of the greatest warriors humanity had ever known were relegated to the role of passive observers, witnessing the relentless titanic clash between Horus and the Emperor, perpetually beyond their grasp. However, amidst this chaotic struggle, a fervent proclamation pierced the cosmic ether: the Emperor must live. This roused the Custodes to an unprecedented fervor, one not consistent with their biology. Sensing an unnatural surge of energy emanating from the Emperor's hand, Horus would realize the truth. The Emperor was not wielding his own power, but siphoning it from his adversary, thereby turning the tide of this cosmic conflict. With a resounding blast, the Emperor would retaliate, repelling Horus and reshaping the course of destiny. As this monumental clash between the Emperor and Horus unfurled, a profound transformation occurred within the Emperor's very essence. Rising from the fray, he emerged remade, his countenance adorned with an aura of a newfound ferocity. His armor, once austere, now gleamed with the angular intensity which invoked a sense of martial prowess never before donned by the Emperor. Seizing the mighty world breaker from Horus's grasp, the Emperor unleashed a relentless barrage upon his adversary. Yet Horus was resilient in his warp-spawned malevolence, as he regenerated and counterattacked. With a swift and savage strike, Horus pierced the Emperor's throat with his talon, causing the Emperor to falter once more. Horus, exuding a veneer of triumph and disdain, began his attempt to nail the Emperor upon the throne, with an ominous five-pointed star symbolizing the fate of all despots within his new kingdom. Amidst the clamor of his fervent acolytes, Horus stood poised to revel in his perceived victory. However, a lone custodian, resolute in his defiance, empowered by a force beyond comprehension, confronted Horus, denouncing the despot's hubris with unwavering resolve. In a chilling revelation, the custodian channeled the Emperor's voice, exposing the precarious machinations of the Chaos Pantheon. Enraged by this audacious display of defiance, Horus unleashed a devastating blast which obliterated the brave custodian and his steadfast resistance. Meanwhile, amidst this chaos, Litu, driven and empowered by an unseen force, endeavored to dismantle the throne's accursed nails. Despite Horus's lethal reprisals, Litu persisted, completely unyielding even in the face of his own nigh inevitable annihilation. In the climactic confrontation, the Emperor seized this very opportunity to assail Horus from behind, engaging in a frantic melee with the remnants of the Custodian's shattered weapon. Determined to assert his dominance, Horus envisioned a fate beyond death for the Emperor, vowing to bend him to his will. Yet in a stunning reversal, the Emperor shattered these hopes as he bore down on Horus's head. As this battle occurred, Vulcan, still stalwart, found solace in the pleas of Cyrene. Heeding her call, Vulcan postponed the activation of his penultimate weapon, recognizing the stirring hope amidst the chaos of war. At this time, Allperson and John Grammaticus would emerge from the swirling depths of the warp as they found themselves at the feet of Horus, once a beloved Primarch to them, now had become an inhuman being consumed by treachery. Momentarily taken aback, Horus gazed upon them with a mixture of confusion, pity, and disgust. In a desperate gambit, John Grammaticus uttered one of the few yet extremely potent incantations of Annuncio, unleashing a force that sent Horus reeling. Seizing this opportunity, the two flee as they sprinted towards the Emperor, their voices echoing with urgency. All was driven by a resurgent, unwavering loyalty, as he thrust a dagger into the Emperor's hand, beseeching him to rise once more. With a fervent plea, one of the Emperor's oldest companions, one who had abandoned him previously, pledged his allegiance, vowing to uphold the Emperor's vision and serve as his unwavering guardian. Yet all he would receive would be silence. It would be then that Allperson's desperation would mount, as his pleas remained unanswered. In desperation, he would turn to confront Horus himself, unleashing a barrage of lasgun fire in a desperate bid to protect his oldest friend and his now liege. However, his valiant stand proved fruitless as Horus's talon struck, rendering all naught but crimson mist. Back on Terra, where the rallying cry of "the Emperor must live" would reverberate through the ranks of Sigismund and his beleaguered refugees, infusing them with renewed determination in the face of impending doom, as they had finished all but the last of the Death Guard who had assailed them. It would seem that at this point, the defenders of Terra and their valiant sacrifices would bear fruit, as the Astronomicon would be reignited, casting a brilliant light across the desolate expanse of Terra. As the celestial beacon pierced the endless night, hope would be rekindled within the defenders, as they were consumed by the luminous glow of humanity's beacon. The approaching fleets of the Phalanx, and those heralded by the Primarchs Guillermin and the Lion, were now at play. Their amassed forces would turn the tide of battle on Terra. Yet Horus, still consumed by his delusions of grandeur, remained steadfast in his convictions. In his eyes, the light that now illuminated Terra would serve to unveil the grim truth of his father's demise, and set the stage for the confrontation with the Primarchs who refused to bend the knee to his tyranny. Returning to the throne room, Loken would confront Horus as Loken exposes the sinister and insidious mind-altering grasp of chaos. He would urge Horus recognize their manipulations and how he had become merely a pawn in their cosmic games. Now, wrestling with his inner turmoil, he casted Loken aside and went to deliver a fatal blow to his father, not as a weapon of chaos, but as Horus Lupercal, the War Master. However, his hopes would be dashed, as the Emperor he was about to assail disintegrated before his eyes, revealing the truth, one which he could not have imagined. He had been fooled, and the Emperor had now channeled the power of the Astronomicon and unleashed its luminous energy upon Horus. Overwhelmed by the intensity of the attack, Horus collapses, his spirit all but shattered by the magnitude of the Emperor's renewed might. Yet, even in defeat, a glimmer of hope remained, as the Emperor would offer cryptic assurances promising redemption even amidst this chaotic, climactic battle. Horus, burdened by the weight of his own destiny, issued a haunting plea for the Emperor to end his existence, rather than to allow him to succumb to the machinations of chaos once more, as the gods poured their power back into their now weakened pawn, corrupting him back into the being he once was. Sensing this, Horus braced himself for the inevitable, while the Emperor, embodying both strength and mercy, raised the anathema with a solemn resolve. In a poignant declaration, the Emperor implores that Horus embrace his redemption, offering forgiveness in his final moments. As this happened, the blade pierced Horus's heart as a profound stillness descended upon him, marking the culmination of an epoch-defining struggle. In the aftermath of Horus's demise, the cacophony of the Chaos Gods and their influence on the world diminished. Without their chosen champion, their power on this plane was waning. Ahriman, now disenchanted by mortal distractions, retreated from his realm of knowledge, his arcane pursuits interrupted by the preceding events. As the war retreated from Terra, the veil of darkness lifted, granting respite to the beleaguered defenders. Yet amidst this chaos, a sense of a hollow victory prevailed, as the survivors grappled with the aftermath of the climactic conflict. Amongst them, a lone White Scar wrestled with the existential despair, grappling with a now ever-present absence of purpose, seeing that the specter of impending, inevitable doom had all but faded. As the dust settles on the battlefield, Dorn, accompanied by Valdor and a trio of custodians, ventured into the hollowed throne room, and they were met with a scene of profound devastation, with lifeless bodies strewn about the great chamber, like discarded pawns on a cosmic chessboard. Amidst this grim tableau stood Gabriel Loken, a solitary figure amidst this carnage. It was he who bore witness to the aftermath of this epoch-ending clash. Loken's voice resonated with solemnity as he recounted the harrowing events that transpired moments before their arrival. The Emperor had been the embodiment of humanity's hope, but he now lay motionless, his once mighty frame now frail. Dorn, a man known for his renowned, stoic demeanor, had to grapple with the sight before him, unable to discern any sign of life from the Emperor's ravaged form. In the midst of their grief, Valdor and the Custodes, the Emperor's most loyal warriors, shed silent tears, their anguish and the pain from their failure to protect their liege palpable despite the absence of sound. Valdor, a man who was the epitome of martial prowess, would be one of the few who remained resolute that the Emperor's spark of life remained. It was but a beacon of hope, since for not a moment in his life had the Emperor's connection to him been severed. As this somber scene unfolded, the arrival of the Blood Angels heralded a tumultuous confrontation. Their presence sparked hostility within Valdor's now hardened heart. With unbridled contempt, Valdor would lash out, casting judgment upon the newcomers with venomous fervor. However, the Blood Angels would prove that their madness had been upended and that they had regained their sense of self. In a moment of poignant reflection, Loken was torn between loyalty and grief as he remained steadfast by Horus's form, standing sentinel amidst the chaos of the now ending war. Meanwhile, at this point, the ethereal essence of Malcador, now freed from the confines of mortal flesh, bore witness to the solemn procession of the Emperor as the last hope of humanity was carried to its rightful place upon the ancient throne. As the echoes of battle faded, a new chapter would unfold within the hallowed halls of Lupercal's court. Abaddon, a formidable presence amongst Horus's followers, and one of the last remnants of leadership within the vengeful spirit, stood amidst the aftermath as he gazed upon the wounded and weakened Loken, who with grave countenance recounted the twist of fate which led to the downfall of Horus, of the shattered dreams of a galaxy in turmoil. In a surprising turn of events, Abaddon, the once loyal son of Horus, extended an olive branch of peace, vowing to spare any future bloodshed amongst his brothers, and allowing Loken to stand vigil at Horus's body. However, once again, the most hated man in the galaxy reared his vile and ugly head. Erebus, the conceited, empathetic harbinger of chaos, struck a fatal blow against Loken with his own blade, thereby unleashing the malevolent force known as Samus upon the world, completing the cycle of the demon's birth. Amidst the annals of history, the remaining Imperial historians and orators diligently recorded the events which unfolded as Lion Chase etched the legacy of the heroes of the heresy across the annals of time into imperial record. John Grammaticus would go on to navigate the tapestry of fate as he weaved the threads of destiny with meticulous care, his journey now guided by a feather from the wings of Sanguinius himself, which seemed to carry a power all their own. As the saga drew to a close, Keeler, a beacon of unwavering faith, knelt before the golden visage of the Emperor, her prayers now echoing through the corridors of eternity as a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity. Even amidst the chaos, of betrayal. In the aftermath of this conflict, humanity was left to ponder the consequences of their actions and the sacrifices made, and they were forced to bear witness to wounds that may never fully heal. Yet amidst this turmoil, it seemed humanity reflected and found a beacon of hope within their own resilience and a newfound faith through the road ahead. Though for those loyal, the road ahead may be fraught with uncertainty, they would move on and march forward with courage and conviction, united in their resolve to strike down those who had betrayed them, united in their resolve to uphold the Imperium as a means to safeguard the future of humankind. For in the face of darkness, even though it was Pyrrhic, humanity stood, and while humanity may never rise to the same levels of glory, they proved that they would not go silently into that cold and dreadful night. In the aftermath of the climactic events that bookended the Horus Heresy, the surviving loyalists scrambled to mend the fractures within their now wounded Imperium. Amongst these remaining defenders were the Dark Angels, who at the time had been known for their unyielding loyalty to the Emperor above all else. Yet it seems that amidst the treachery of war, something had began to corrupt segments of the Dark Angels from within. Back on Caliban, the once proud homeworld of the Dark Angels, which had been shrouded in the unfathomable depths of warp storms since almost the beginnings of the Horus Heresy, was now primed for the return of their Primarch, Lionel Johnson. However, little did the Primarch and his loyal sons know that within Caliban's embrace, it seemed, betrayal had begun to unfold. Upon their arrival in orbit, the Dark Angels were met not with the open arms of their kin, but rather the hail of gunfire from their own garrison. Bewildered and feeling betrayed beyond all reason, Lionel Johnson sought answers amidst the chaos, only to uncover a sinister plot masterminded by his second in command, and all but father figure, Luther. It seems that Luther had been consumed by bitterness and resentment, which had sown the seeds to allow himself to be corrupted by Chaos's treacherous embrace, which led to Luther using trickery to convince many of the still loyal Dark Angels on Caliban to believe that they had been betrayed, and become what would eventually be known as the Fallen, leading to their attack on their Primarch. What followed was a titanic clash, in large part due to Luther and the Lion both having access to some of the most powerful and dangerous relics that the Imperium had decided to hide. This battle would determine the fate of Caliban and the Dark Angels themselves, and amidst the traitorous roar of orbital bombardments and the crackling energies of the ruinous powers now turned from Terra to Caliban, the Lion and Luther would confront each other on the once proud world of Caliban, which would be torn asunder, its very essence almost entirely consumed by the flames of betrayal. Yet amidst this devastation, it seems that the Lion's body had become lost amidst the chaos, his fate unknown to many of the Dark Angels, leaving behind only whispers of his ultimate destiny. And as the dust settled on Caliban, only ruins remained. A mere fragment of the planet would now serve as a mobile station, a bastion for the First Legion, and upon this shard of the planet, a fortress monastery would be left standing. Now, it is important to understand that at the end of the Horus Heresy, even though they were battered, the loyalists overall came out better than the traitors did in many respects, and they were angry. So they would embark on a crusade of redemption and destruction known as the Great Scouring, and in this monumental campaign they would hunt down and wage wars unlike anything that had been waged before against the traitor legions, with the desire of purging every shred of their taint from every single corner of the Imperium, bar none. Everyone who had aided the traitors would be branded as excommunicato traitores by imperial decree, and they would be forced to flee into the Eye of Terror in order to hide amongst the nightmarish realms of the gods of chaos. This is in large part due to the Imperium sparing no effort to erase all traces of their existence. The homeworlds of many of the traitors expunged from reality, destroyed, leveled, to the point that some traitor Primarchs had to attempt to recreate their homeworlds in the warp. From the charred ruins of Isstvan V to the cursed lands of Davin, the forces of chaos were hunted relentlessly, Worlds scoured clean, their populations annihilated in the name of purity. This includes those who served alongside the traitors due to being forced, not just those corrupted minions of Horus's legions. Even the Dark Mechanicum who had rebelled, and the twisted remnants of the Imperial army who had sided with the traitors, would be purged without mercy. No chance for redemption, no ability to return. But the scars of the heresy ran deep and echoed across the stars for solar decades to come. And though loyalist legions had been ravaged during the drop site massacre on Isstvan V, they sought to rebuild and reform, yet they would forever bear the burdens of their losses. In order to prevent an event such as the heresy from ever happening again, the Codex Astartes was penned by the visionary Primarch Reboot Guilliman, and this would create a new era of warfare, redefining how Space Marines would function. The legions would be sundered into chapters, and the chapters would become significantly more independent and flexible. This was in large part due to Reboot Guilliman gaining the reins of control after the Emperor's internment into the Golden Throne, as he was declared Lord Commander of the Imperium and the Imperial Regent, with a significant amount of support from his loyal brothers, even those who loathed him for sundering their legions after all their efforts to defend humanity. Yet under his guidance, the Imperium began to rebuild, hopeful for a brighter future amidst the ever-encroaching darkness of the galaxy. However, the Horus Heresy had shown the inherent fractures in humanity, and even in humanity's greatest empire would this have long-standing repercussions, including the burgeoning emergence of religion within the Imperium, which ironically enough would be a unifying force that had allowed the Imperium to survive the darkest days of the heresy, and would later be the fabric which would hold humanity together and become a weapon against the forces of chaos, all despite the Emperor's efforts to stamp any and all forms of religion out of existence. Now, another rather monumentous incident that occurred shortly after the heresy would happen on the planet of Escador, a rather remote and isolated, desolate world where two Primarchs would clash once again. These were Reboot Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines Legion, and his brother, the Primarch Alfarius of the Alpha Legion. And while engaged in combat, Guilliman was under the false impression that this was Alfarius. However, records would show it was in fact Omegon, who had assumed his brother's identity following Alfarius' demise at the hands of Rogel Dorn during their battle on Pluto. And eventually, Alfarius, or rather Omegon, would fall, his life extinguished, or potentially it was a very skilled Alpha Legionnaire who had been changed in order to play the role of Alfarius. However, this was a victory for the Ultramarines, yet it was fleeting, because as they celebrated their triumph, they found themselves beset on all sides by a cunning attack from the Alpha Legion, who had struck the moment their Primarch had been bested, and they were even able to bolster their fierce resistance against the Imperium with the natives of Escador. However, due to being faced with overwhelming odds, Guilliman made the difficult decision to retreat. After days upon days of fighting, his forces were battered but unbroken, and from the safety of their void ships they would unleash a barrage upon their elusive foes, seeking not only to break the resolve of their enemies, but to secure victory through an overwhelming and unmitigated display of firepower. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, the Alpha Legion proved to be too elusive for this to function as planned. And in the aftermath of the battle, as the smoke cleared, the confounding nature of the Alpha Legion left even Guilliman wondering if he had truly been victorious against Alfarius, or if this had been another of his brother's many ruses. Another of the most notable incidents to occur shortly after the end of the heresy was one that some refused to believe ever happened, all the while lamenting their favorite son of the Emperor. This was the Iron Cage, and it unfolded on the war-torn world of Sebastus IV, where the Imperial fists would clash against their brutal sworn enemies, the Iron Warriors. And this conflict stands as a testament to the fallibility of even the most stoic of Primarchs, as it seems Dorn would lose almost all self-control, and charge in, and this occurred at the height of the Great Scouring, so almost the entirety of the Imperial Fist's legion descended upon Sebastus IV, their sights set on besieging one of the most formidable fortresses ever erected by the Iron Warriors. This assault force was led by their Primarch Rogal Dorn, as the Imperial Fist had vowed to crush the Iron Warriors' forces and reclaim the world in the name of the Emperor. But little did they know that the Iron Warriors had lain a series of cunning traps, turning the very planet itself into a veritable fortress. Caught in the jaws of the elaborate schemes that the Iron Warriors had set about, the Imperial Fists found themselves struggling tooth and nail, losing vast amounts of the Legion, since they had not been prepared to fight such a well-defended enemy stronghold. However, despite unacceptable casualty rates, the Imperial Fists refused to yield, their determination being unshakable in the face of this particular adversary. Yet, with their ammunition exhausted, they would be forced to resort to the brutal hand-to-hand combat that was more synonymous with the Blood Angels and the World Eaters. The trenches of the very fortress they now fought for flowed with rivers of blood as bodies would slowly inflate and decompose. Yet even as defeat seemed inevitable for the Imperial Fists, salvation would arrive in the form of the Ultramarines Legion, led by Rabut Yeoman, and it was with their intervention that the Iron Warriors would be driven from the planet, sparing both legions from what seemed to be mutual annihilation. However, the scars of the Iron Cage would run deep within what was left of the Legion, as the Imperial Fists had been whittled down to an echo of what they once were, this being one of Rogal Dorn's greatest failures, as the Iron Cage proved to be transformative for the Imperial Fists, shaping the very existence and character of the survivors for millennia to come. In the aftermath of this event, Rogal Dorn's staunch resistance to Guilliman's vision for dividing the Space Marine legions into chapters waned significantly, in essence allowing the man to acquiesce to his brother's demands, despite his own desires to protest, due to being allowed no other choice. This has led to the belief that Rogal Dorn intentionally stepped into the trap set by the Iron Warriors in order to force his own hand without losing any face. Now, on the eastern fringes of the galaxy, the Night Lords, driven by the twisted visions and ideologies of their Primarch Konrad Curze, would embark on a campaign of terror and unremitted genocide unlike any seen before. Unlike their fellow traitor legions who fled into the depths of the Eye of Terror, the Night Lords would remain united, their resolve and identity unbroken by defeat, and with ruthless efficiency, they would spread a wave of violence and horror across the eastern fringes of the galaxy, leaving entire worlds bathed in the blood of the innocent. So much flesh would be torn asunder that an entire world may be cloaked in it. This was a testament of what the Night Lords were capable of if left to their own devices. However, it would be during this incident that a figure would emerge, known as Shen, a Calidus assassin of the Officio Assassinorum, who would make their mark on history. As she infiltrated the Night Lord's stronghold on Sasgula, she would confront Primarch Konrad Curze by herself in a battle that could have potentially decided the fates of millions, or so some records say, while others detail Curze's fatalism causing him to accept the assassin's blade into himself, allowing Shen to strike a fatal blow, ending Curze's reign of terror, and bringing an end to the Night Haunter and his Night Lords' uncontrolled rampages for what at the time was the foreseeable future. Yet, even in death, Konrad Curze's legacy endured, as it is said that through welcoming his demise, he freed his legion from his own fatalistic beliefs, allowing them to be marked not by his passing, but by the innate inborn desires that he had instilled upon them. However, from here, the Loyalists would all but corral the Night Lords into the Eye of Terror, with a force of multiple legions descending down upon them like a ravenous horde, slaying many, but not succeeding in eviscerating the Legion as a whole. However, all the conflicts were not just loyalists against traitor, because on the twisted and unruly landscape of the demon world known as Scalathrax, two traitor legions would clash against each other. The world was desired both by the Emperor's children, for it had a large amount of Eldari soul stones, and it was their belief that this would be a veritable feast for she who thirsts, and the World Eaters, who had selected this planet as a base of operations. And at the heart of this brutal conflict was where Karn, the Eliquary of Angron, the champion of Khorne and the 8th captain of the 12th Legion, would gain his legendary moniker of Karn the Betrayer. As an unending battle raged on, and a frigid night of unimaginable cold descended on Scalathrax, it appeared as if the World Eaters and the Emperor's children would have reached a temporary truce in order to rest and recuperate before returning to battle once the cold winds passed. However, driven by madness and a true, undeniable devotion to his patron god Khorne, Karn the Betrayer unleashed his fury upon his fellow World Eaters, picking up his flamer and burning down all his allies' housings, chastising them for not continuing to fight and for displeasing their god. And as this went on, he would continue to tear apart both friend and foe with the legendary chain axe Gorechild. All those who refused to fight would be cut down by Gorechild, as the streets were painted red. And it was at this moment that Karn the Betrayer truly became Khorne's favorite mortal, becoming a veritable harbinger of death and destruction who left nothing but carnage in his wake. And as the flames engulfed the night, this would be the final time the World Eaters were a singular solidified legion. However, Karn's actions did prove fruitful, as not only did the World Eaters tear themselves apart, but the Emperor's children were also savagely ravaged in this desperate struggle for survival. However, the most important aspect of the legacy of Scalathrax was the World Eaters permanently becoming a series of scattered warbands, each attempting to worship Khorne in their own way. Another of the earth-shaking moments post the heresy was the conflict between Magnus the Red and Leman Russ on the shrine world of Gram. It was here that the traitorous Thousand Suns would launch their assault on the Space Wolves in order to settle old scores, all the while seeking to desecrate the shrine world, which had been made in honor of a wolf lord who had sacrificed themselves for Leman Russ. And in this conflict, Leman Russ would attempt to use the Spear of Russ in order to be able to match the powers of the now demon Primarch, Magnus the Red. And as the dust settled, the shrine world stood. Though bearing scars, it would remain as a symbol of the Space Wolves' unyielding tenacity. One of the most stark changes from pre-heresy to post-heresy would be witnessed amongst the cold expanse of the Nostromo system. This was the home system of the Night Lords, where the Blood Angels' Retribution fleet embarked on an investigation of the moon of Tenebor. As the Space Marines of the 33rd Company would descend upon Tenebor, they were met with a chilling sight: a reinforced Void Station, which was once a bastion of strength, lie gutted and lifeless, in essence left as a silent witness to an unknown calamity. Even though the data cores of the station were damaged beyond almost all repair, the Blood Angels were able to find out that this was caused by a brutal assault by a Black Shield force, which left nothing but death in its wake. However, the mystery would only deepen further still when evidence came to light on a distant hive world by the name of Cairn. There, amidst the ruins of a once thriving civilization, they would find that rogue traitor Erasmus Sake unearthed clues of an apparent Astartes force which was near legion in size, which was working in secrecy, destroying everything they could, then leaving like phantoms in the night just as quickly as they descended. And it seems, in this world, they had sealed all the inhabitants of the hive cities as deep as they could within the world, leaving them to perish, slowly but surely. As the pieces of this puzzle began to coalesce, one question would remain. What was the origin of this mysterious Black Shield's fleet? And what dark purpose drove them on their relentless march across the Nostromo system? Later, within the remote Dominion of Storms, a task force of Ultramarines legionaries comprised of the battle-hardened survivors from the 19th, the 48th, and the 207th Destroyer cadres embarked on a daring mission to confront a renegade force of word-bearers. Their target was specifically to take out a Gloriana-class battleship known as the Chronicle of Ashes. As the Ultramarines would engage the renegade word-bearers, a fierce battle would ensue, as furious boarding actions would occur over the span of 2 solar days. Nearly 300 astartes would descend upon the Chronicle of Ashes, and their bolter fire irrevocably changed the vessel, as they swept through the labyrinthian corridors, wiping out any resistance they came upon, and against overwhelming odds, they were able to overcome the traitor marines, and gain a vessel for the Imperium. Yet amidst the chaos of battle, a startling discovery was made. Within the vaulted halls of the Chronicle of Ashes, amidst its upper decks, they uncovered a relic of the past, an ancient account written in the twisted tongues of ancient Cloichus, the word-bearer's homeworld. Within its pages was a treasure trove of secrets, revealing truths long concealed from the eyes of Imperial scholars, including the harrowing tale of Primarch Lorgar and his descent into the abyss of chaos. With the capture of the Chronicle of Ashes, it seemed that the Ultramarines lay claim to more than just a vessel of war, which would be cleansed and rededicated as Lex Talonis, a symbol of their triumph over the darkness. But they gained a key foothold into how chaos operated and a new avenue of investigation, one which had previously been restricted from all Loyalist Space Marines. Eventually, the Loyalists would get to planets such as Forge World Pampar 5, which had been a key point for munition supply and manufacture of weapons for the traitors, and Pampor would quickly become the front lines of a near unending assault. Its skies would be darkened by the smoke of battle, blotting out the sun, as the blood of countless warriors would stain its ground ever red. It would be in the year 019 M31 that the system would witness this catastrophic warfare, as the Loyalists launched a relentless campaign to clear the entire planet of all life and free it from the clutches of traitors. The Third Battle of Pampor showed that the Loyalists would venture forth and reclaim all that they could, no matter the cost. Within the Nostromo sector, the Blood Angels Reclamation Task Force would embark to reconquer the Shroud of Eventide, a vessel of the traitorous legions. This task force would be led, in particular, by the warriors of the 9th Legion, now denoted as the Angels Vermilion, and their task force set its sights on the space hulk known as the Crimson Intent, a relic of the Night Lord's grim history. Their objective was clear: salvage the remains, the Shroud of Eventide, and breathe new life into its tainted hull. And throughout this, the 9th Bloodline would confront the twisted remains of their fallen Space Marine kin, and they even succeeded in reclaiming the vessel, dedicating it to the service of both the fallen Sanguinius and the Emperor himself. Yet they too would witness the mysterious Astartes Black Shield force that roamed the sector, and as the 9th Bloodline scoured the wreckage and slew any traitors that they found, they came ever closer to finding out the truth behind the elusive Black Shields. And it would be around 021 M31 that Robert Guilliman, the esteemed Primarch of the Ultramarines and the Lord Commander of the Imperium, would finally achieve the culmination of a lifetime of work, the completion and the distribution of the Codex Astartes. This was a magnum opus, a tome of unparalleled significance, which would serve as a beacon of order amidst the chaos of war. Within its pages, Guilliman meticulously outlined a new paradigm for the organization and tactics of all Loyalist Space Marine chapters, both present and future, drawing upon his centuries of wisdom and his chapters' experiences and strategic insights to craft the Codex Astartes, as it would be a blueprint for the salvation of the Imperium, guiding the actions of its warriors across the stars, some more than others. Central to Guilliman's vision was the restructuring and shattering of the Legion's astartes. The already decimated legions from the Dropsite Massacre were unable to resist, and many of them even aligned with the thinking of Guilliman, as they had been struggling to craft enough gene seed to supply Legion numbers in any actionable way. So upon this, new chapters would rise, and animosity would build within these chapters. As honors were stripped, titles laid bare, cousin turned to stranger, and brother to cousin. To some, the Codex Astartes was salvation. To others, Guilliman would be viewed as a butcher, succeeding with a scalpel where Horus had failed with a blade. This butchery was explained as necessary because the legions would no longer stand as monolithic entities vulnerable to the whims of tyrants and demigods. Instead, the designation of 1,000 Astartes chapters would allow any singular force to be overwhelmed by those surrounding it. The significance of the Codex Astartes cannot be overestimated, as its edicts served as the bulwark against the forces of corruption and heresy for centuries to come, and it served as an insurance that the awesome power of the Legion's Astartes would never again be wielded by a single individual, reassuring the citizens of the Imperium that their angels would no longer be bared in such numbers against them. This would lead to the Second Founding, an event which marked the reorganization of the Loyalists' legions that still remained into smaller, more manageable formations known as chapters. Each chapter would comprise of 1,000 Space Marines, no more, no less. And the rationale behind this was clear, preventing the concentration of power that had led to the devastation that was wrought by the traitorous legions. It was believed that by dispersing the strength of the Space Marines in forces across multiple chapters, the Imperium ensured that no single individual could ever again wield the unchecked might of an entire legion. In total, in this second founding, 23 new Space Marine chapters were forged from the ashes of the old legions, each tasked with upholding the honor and duty of the Emperor's most loyal warriors. Yet amidst this reorganization, the original names of the Loyalist legions were preserved. These chapters would serve as testaments to the storied legacies of the bloodlines. Amidst this birth of new chapters lurked the clandestine establishment of many of the Grey Knights' practices, as they had been crafted in secrecy by Malcador the Sigillite, the Regent of Terra, as a chapter solely comprised of Psykers, which would be hidden away on the moon of Saturn, known as Titan. Within a pocket dimension of the Imperium, the Grey Knight's foundation was shielded from Horus and the prying eyes of his minions. This allowed the forces of the Grey Knights to slowly mature and grow in strength, in order to have an actionable force that was ready and seasoned for duty, eventually emerging much later as the vanguard of the Ordo Malleus, the branch of the Inquisition known for their dedicated warfare against the demonic threats of chaos. After the Horus Heresy, Primarch Corvus Corax, the leader of the Raven Guard, had felt rather guilty for the loss of many of his sons, along with the consequences of the Raven Guard's ambitious Space Marine augmentation program. And due to the remorse and guilt Corax felt, for a time he would retreat into the solitude of his personal chamber within the Raven Spire on Deliverance. Here, Corax sought deep introspection, where he had been haunted with the weight of his decisions, and he beseeched the memory of the recently ascended Emperor for absolution, yet he found no respite from his anguish. This caused him to act on the need for redemption rather than cold calculated logic. And exactly 1 year after his self-imposed seclusion, Primarch Corvus Corax would depart aboard a transport bound to the depths of the Eye of Terror. The fate of Corvus Corax for a long time would remain unknown, as his ultimate destination was obscured by uncertainty. However, upon his departure from Deliverance, the last word spoken to any of his sons would be the haunting refrain, "Nevermore." Yet, currently in the 41st millennium, there have been many whispers and conjecture about the Raven Lord's final odyssey, and it seems there is some evidence that he has now become a creature of the warp, freed from his mortal coil, eternally stalking Lorgar, constantly hunting down the sons of Clochus. All the while, the legacy of the Raven Guard would slowly be rebuilt by those who were left. Unfortunately, the Raven Guard would continue to suffer more and more, as eventually, within Segmentum Tempestus, an individual known as Diant Mal would emerge, and he would amass an assault upon Amara Prime. There, in the swirling nebula and the debris fields of the future Ophrys sector, he would forge an alliance between a motley crew of renegades, mutants, heretics, and individuals who would later coalesce and become christened the Shadowed Ones. And this would lead to the Battle of Lix and the devastation known as the Scourge of Diant Carbane. For solar decades, they wielded terror as their weapon, using tactics akin to the Night Lords. And through a series of conflicts, they would humble the remaining Raven Guard further still. But eventually, they would run into the beings who had just awakened to a galaxy seemingly changed. The Necrons, creatures of ancient living metal, awoke. This was the Mayanica dynasty, which emerged to challenge Mal's domain. And it seems they were all but eviscerated, as the Shadowed Ones and Diant Mal himself seemed to have vanished off the face of history. So, in an unintended turn of events, it seemed the Necrons had acted as allies to the Raven Guard. And as the Great Scouring continued into O32M31, the Ultramarines set their sights on the world known as Clochus, which had been tainted by the dark machinations of the Word-Bearers. Upon their arrival, the Ultramarines were greeted by a scene of utter devastation. A world that was scarred by the horrors of betrayal, its once thriving industries reduced to rubble, its people teetering on the edge of oblivion. In the wake of Lorgar's heresy and the insidious spread of chaos, the newly formed Inquisition decreed Clochus as unfit for redemption, which meant the Ultramarines would have to unleash the wrath of Exterminatus on the beleaguered planet and the few souls that remained, as the mighty battle barge Octavius rained down cyclonic torpedoes upon the surface of the world, rendering the already fragile geological makeup of the planet not under its onslaught. Today, Clochus only exists as a memory, a shattered remnant lost to galactic history. As this went on, the rather distant Primarch of the White Scars, Jagadai Khan, would embark on a fateful journey into the heart of darkness. Legends tell us of the Khan's relentless pursuit of the Drukhari, also known as the Dark Eldar, denizens of the Webway, who had wrought havoc upon Mundus Prime in the wake of the Battle of Chorus V. With his first Brotherhood by his side, the Khan would venture into a warp gate in hot pursuit of the treacherous Drukhari who had so angered him. And it seems his fate, like many of the Primarchs, would be lost to the sands of time. What transpired in the depths of the Webway remains a haunting secret. The question of, did the Primarch succumb to the maddening embrace of the Webway and become forever lost to its unforgiving currents and infinite expanses? Or was he ensnared by the sinister machinations of the vile Xenos tyrants and forever sealed his fate in chains of dark torment? However, amidst the uncertainty, a glimmer of hope seems to endure as the White Scars cling to the belief that the Kagan still roams the cosmos, his indomitable spirit unbroken by the passage of eons. As they whisper tales of his eternal hunt, a solitary figure traversing the infinite labyrinthian pathways of the Webway, ever vigilant against the encroaching shadows. For the White Scars and their successors, the legacy of Jagadai Khan lives on, a beacon of hope for a great resurgence in a galaxy gripped by darkness, as they await the day their Primarch shall return. After the sundering of the legions, Reboot Guilliman would lead the Ultramarines chapter for another standard century, and it was during this period of time where he would show himself as a true leader amongst men, gaining the adoration amongst countless souls in the Imperium. As Lord Commander of the Imperium and Imperial Regent, Guilliman steered humanity through the treacherous waters of the post-heresy turmoil. With the traitors routed and the Emperor's fate now sealed on the Golden Throne, the Imperium had been on the brink of collapse, yet Guilliman's strategic brilliance and unwavering resolve held the fractious realms together. However, fate had other plans for the valiant hero, as he would eventually engage in a fateful void battle against the Emperor's children's flagship, the Pride of the Emperor. Guilliman would be confronted by his brother turned foe, the transfigured demon Primarch Fulgrim, and in a cruel twist of fate, Guilliman fell victim to Fulgrim's treacherous poisoned blade. Yet even amidst death's grip, Guilliman would endure, his mortal remains enshrouded in a stasis field on the hallowed grounds of Macragge's Temple of Correction, awaiting the day he would return to lead the Imperium once more. But as the wheels of destiny were ever turning, that time would arrive in the year 999 M41. Through the divine intervention of the Emperor and the technological prowess of Belisarius Cawl, along with the power of the Eldari god Yenid, Guilliman was resurrected from his slumber, once more returning to the fray of battle in order to lead humanity back from the brink once more. In the twilight hours of what would become known as the Feast of the Emperor's Ascension, a solemn occasion which marked the triumph of the Emperor over Horus during the Siege of Terra, Primarch Leman Russ, while surrounded by his loyal wolf lords, convened a grand feast on the hallowed halls of the Fang. Yet amidst the revelry, a palpable unease gripped the Primarch's noble countenance, his gaze fixed upon the distant horizon as Russ was overtaken by a trance-like state which befuddled his sons. In a moment which would echo throughout the ages, Russ would besiege his trusted wolf guard and closest confidants to accompany him, save for his faithful champion, Bjorn the Fell-Handed, as the Primarch would depart from the Great Hall with his retinue in tow, leaving behind the assembly of space wolves. The mystery of Russ's disappearance would endure as a testament to the mysterious machinations of the Emperor, as through the ages the saga has been recounted by none other than Bjorn the Fell-Handed, now a venerable dreadnought whose wisdom has transcended the passage of time for millennia, as the space wolves await the return of their liege in a time that they believe would become known as the Wolf Times, where their king shall return for a final battle against the forces of darkness. It would not be until year 781 M31 that Abaddon the Despoiler, the heir to the mantle of War Master, following the demise of Horus Lupercal, would unleash the first of the 14 Black Crusades upon the Imperium, with Cadia as its focal point. This malevolent onslaught marked the opening of Abaddon's Gambit in a series of relentless pursuits for galactic domination. Yet despite the fervent onslaught of the First Black Crusade, the bulwarks of the Cadian Gate held fast, thwarting the Despoiler's conquest. However, undeterred by defeat due to Abaddon harboring a tenacity unlike any seen through the ages, he would embark on a series of campaigns titled the Long War. And beneath the veneer of failure, each Black Crusade would serve as a sinister overture in unraveling the fabric of reality itself, as Abaddon, in a quest for vengeance, would vow to sunder the barriers of the Cadian Gate and carve a crimson tapestry straight through the Imperium's very heart. And amidst this maelstrom of war, the valiant Primarch Rogel Dorn, the Praetorian of Terra, would confront his own destiny on the battlefield, leading a daring assault against a Chaos Armada. And as Dorn's actions would defy the odds and strike a sundering blow on the encroaching Dark Armada, it would seem that not all would go as planned, as during the crescendo of this attack, Dorn's fate would become shrouded in uncertainty, his valiant charge culminating in the desperate struggle on board an accursed vessel known as the Sword of Sacrilege, where in the aftermath of the battle, the Imperial Fists, who functioned as the custodians of Dorn's legacy, discovered only fragments of their Primarch's armor, along with a severed hand, which has served as a symbol for the Imperial Fists ever since. Upon the now skeletal fist, every chapter master of the Imperial Fists has scrawled their name onto the bones of the Praetorian of Terra. And while some believe Dorn survived and will return once again, many are assured of his penultimate fate. Amidst the aftermath of the Siege of Terra, it seemed a clandestine movement had emerged within the depths of humanity, one steeped in secrecy and religious reverence for the Emperor. But eventually, in year 931, a revered figure known as Factidus, who was a decorated veteran of the Imperial Army, would clandestinely establish the Temple of the Savior Emperor upon Terra, as he would embrace defying the tenets of the Imperial truth and ignite the formal creation of a religion devoted to the Emperor of mankind. From the humble origins, the Temple of the Savior blossomed into a beacon of faith. Its teachings would echo across the Imperium, propagated by the faithful servants of the Imperialis Auxilia, the Armada Imperialis, and later the Astra Militarum and the Imperial Navy. The fervor of the God Emperor's worship would spread like wildfire, birthing the Adeptus Ministorum, which would become the spiritual authority of the Imperium and the very center of the imperial governance and the center of the identity of humanity as a whole. As it began to snowball, the echoes of the imperial truth would fade into obscurity and be supplanted by the resounding chorus of devotion, whose origins had in fact been derived from the last remnants of the Latitio Divinatum, Lorgar's very founding text, the one which had had him censored by the Emperor. In conclusion, it seems that Lorgar had actually won. His faith, his devotion, the religion he sought to create in the name of the Emperor, had supplanted the imperial truth, much to the chagrin of the current Demon Primarch. If you watched until the end, I would really like to ask you if you could subscribe.